Hello there, and welcome to The Tired Thinker, where ideas slow down and thought can breathe. Tonight's quiet journey drifts through time loops and bootstrap paradoxes. The stories where endings create beginnings and the future shapes the past. Moments repeat, choices echo, reality bends, and somehow it feels strangely peaceful because life loops too. We revisit old thoughts, repeat the same emotions, relearn the same lessons. Maybe these paradoxes aren't just fiction. Maybe they reveal how we actually grow. Before we wander deeper, tell me, where are you listening from? And what time is it right now, in your loop? It's beautiful, isn't it? A video about repetition, yet all of us scattered across the world, meeting here in the same moment, connected by curiosity and calm. If these slow ideas help you unwind, or you just like falling asleep to soft mysteries, I'd be grateful if you gently liked the video or subscribed. It helps this tired little channel reach others who think and rest in circles too. Now, I opened my eyes at 6:12 a.m. again. The red digits of the alarm clock glowed in the dim light, steady and familiar. I did not set the alarm. I never do. It still goes off every morning at the same time, and I always wake up a second before it rings. The world felt heavy with silence, as if it waited for me to move first. I sat up and listened for any difference from yesterday. There never was one. The floor felt cold against my feet. I stood, walked to the window, and pulled back the curtain. The same sky, the same clouds, the same old man walking his dog across the street. He always paused at the same mailbox and adjusted his hat. I mouthed the movements with him like I had memorized a script. I tested myself with small changes each day. One time, I shouted through the window to startle him. He did not react. It was as if sound needed permission to exist. The next day, he walked like always, unbothered. When I tried to stop him in person, he looked at me with blank eyes, then resumed his path. The world did not care what I did. I showered, I dressed, I waited. It took time for the truth to settle back into my bones. I was the only one who remembered yesterday, and the day before, and hundreds more before that. To everyone else, each day was the first time. To me, it was the same record spinning. I kept notes at first, a journal under the bed. I wrote names, events, accidents. But each morning, the journal reset like everything else. Blank pages, clean cover, no proof that anything had ever happened. I burned it once. The next morning, there it was again, untouched. I stopped writing. At 7 a.m., the phone rang. It always rang at this time. I answered. A woman asked for someone named Daniel. I told her she had the wrong number. She apologized. We hung up. The same words every day. Once, I tried saying nothing. Silence stretched for a while. Then the line clicked dead. The next morning, she called again as if nothing changed. I ate breakfast, toast and eggs. The fridge never ran out of food. I tested that too. I dumped everything once. The next day, it was all back, perfectly arranged. I did not question the how anymore. I only wondered why. At 8:30 a.m., I walked outside. My neighbor waved at me. A car drove by, playing the same song. A child dropped a backpack on the sidewalk. I could predict each moment down to the second. I tried staying inside one day to avoid the script. The world came to me instead. My neighbor knocked on my door to check on me. The child played outside my window. The car drove by anyway. The day insisted on happening. I tested pain. I tripped and scraped my hand. It healed the next time I woke. I tested danger. I stood in the street and let a car hit me. The impact came fast, then nothing. I opened my eyes at 6:12 a.m. without a bruise. I stopped testing death after a while. It felt too easy. The worst part was the people. I met them over and over. I knew their stories before they spoke. I knew who laughed loud. I knew who cried in secret. I knew who lied. They felt like shadows next to me, repeating their lines. I tried telling them the truth once. I said time was looping. I said nothing mattered. They looked concerned and suggested I get rest. When I woke the next morning, they forgot. One day, I tried to be kind. I helped everyone I could. I caught the child before he tripped. I gave the old man a better hat. I brought food to a struggling family. It felt good for a moment. Then 6:12 a.m. came again. The child fell. The old hat returned. The family went hungry. My help vanished with the night. Another day, I tested the opposite. I shouted at people. I broke things. I stole a car and drove until the road ended. The world did not fight back. It only waited until I slept, then reset, like always. Good or bad, nothing left a mark. Still, I kept waking. I kept trying. I learned small ways to entertain myself. I explored every building in town. I memorized every book in the library. I learned piano, painting, foreign languages. I built a secret tunnel beneath my house once just to see if it would stay. It vanished the next morning, but the memory stayed with me. Those memories became my only real possessions. I began to notice tiny changes. They were rare: a flicker in the sky, a missing bird. One morning, the neighbor hesitated before waving. It lasted half a second, but it was new. I focused on those moments. I replayed them in my head. I wondered if I was causing them. I tested the theory. I repeated the same action for days in a row. I stood in the same spot and stared at the sky. On the seventh day, a cloud moved differently. It was small, but it was mine. I felt something like hope. I tried other patterns. If I said hello to the same person 10 days in a row, on the 10th, their smile lasted longer. If I picked up the child's backpack every day, one morning he said thank you before dropping it. They did not remember me, but something in them changed. It was like the world could learn if I insisted. I stopped fighting the loop. I started shaping it. Slow, careful work. I practiced patience. Each day became a brick. I built trust with strangers who forgot me each sunrise. I made the old man laugh with different jokes until one day he laughed before I spoke. He sensed what was coming. His eyes held a spark of recognition, even if he did not know why. I did not know how long it would take. I only knew the loop was not perfect. It could bend. I wondered if it could break. I no longer cared if I escaped. I only cared that the world felt more real each day. At 6:12 a.m., I opened my eyes. The alarm had not gone off yet. I waited for the familiar ring. It did not come. The silence was different, heavy in a new way. I sat up, heart steady. I walked to the window. The sky was brighter than usual. The old man was not outside. The dog was gone. For the first time, I did not know what would happen next. The first time the world reset, it felt peaceful. I woke to quiet sunlight, steady walls, and the smell of coffee. There was no warning, no shift in the air, no sense that the day had lived before. It felt ordinary. That was the trap. Time loops never start with panic. They start with calm. They let you believe everything is normal. You move through the morning. You brush your teeth. You unlock the door. You see the neighbor watering the same row of plants. The memory of yesterday arrives late, like a shadow catching up. Then you realize the neighbor said the same words in the same tone at the same second. You stop mid-step. You scan the street. You feel the ground under your feet. The air seems too familiar. You think you are mistaken. You try to continue as if nothing happened, but the mind does not let go. Curiosity starts as a question. Did this already happen? You test small things. You move a chair an inch at night. When you wake, the chair is back. You change your route to work. The world guides you back with traffic or road closures. You tell yourself it is coincidence, yet coincidence repeats. You hold conversations and hear the same jokes every time. People speak as if reading from a script. When you interrupt, they look confused, like you broke something they cannot see. You notice the clock hits the same times with precision. You begin to wait for moments before they arrive. Tranquility fades. Curiosity becomes habit. You begin to track patterns. The woman in the red coat drops her keys near the bus stop at 8:17 a.m. The man in a suit sneezes on the corner. A bird flies into the same window at midday. These events play on a loop. You try to change them. You catch the woman's keys before they fall. She thanks you, smiles, and drops them again tomorrow. You shout to scare the bird away. It crashes into the glass anyway. The man sneezes even if you hand him a tissue. The day does not bend. You start to suspect that you are the only variable. The loop becomes a classroom. You learn the schedule of everything. You explore places you never cared about. You test the limits. You walk through restricted doors. You read private files. You learn secrets strangers carry. There is no punishment. When the day resets, the world forgets. You do not. You build knowledge layer by layer. Curiosity pushes you deeper. Knowledge becomes the only reward. Some loops teach pain. You see disasters before they happen. A child falls from a bike. A fire breaks out in a kitchen. You rush to help. You succeed. You feel proud. Then, the next day, the fall happens again. The fire returns. Your effort never lasts. You try again and again until your hands shake. You start to ask whether helping matters. You learn to accept that the loop does not care about outcomes. It only cares about repetition. Loneliness creeps in. You speak to people knowing they will not remember you. You listen to their stories, even though you have heard them many times. When someone makes you laugh softer the next time because you remember the punchline before they finish. You miss surprise. You miss change. Curiosity tries to fill the gap. You begin to search for cracks in the loop. You push boundaries. You wake before dawn. You stay awake past midnight. You travel far, hoping to reach the edge of the map. The world resists. Roads close. Weather shifts. People block your way with harmless distractions. The loop is not violent. It redirects you like water around a stone. You test danger. You jump from heights. You walk into traffic. You feel the impact. Then you wake with a calm heartbeat, as if nothing happened. Tranquility returns every morning, even when you do not want it. Curiosity turns into obsession. You memorize every inch of your surroundings. You map buildings. You open every drawer. You question every detail. Why does the alarm always ring at the same second? Why does the sky never change color? Why does no one age? You try speaking nonsense to see if anyone reacts. They do not. You try confessing your fear. They comfort you with phrases you have heard before. Their sympathy feels scripted. You stop expecting real connection. Time becomes your tool. You use the loop to learn. You master languages. You practice music. You solve puzzles. You replay conversations until you find the perfect words. You start to enjoy the control. If the day resets, failure costs nothing. You take risks. You test ideas. You shape events for your own curiosity. You become the author of your own experiment. Tranquility has long vanished, but purpose replaces it. You wonder if the loop has rules. You search for people who act different. One day, someone hesitates before repeating a line. Another day, someone glances at the clock like they expect it to reset. These moments are rare. They spark hope. You follow these people. You watch them closely. Most return to the script, but occasionally, one lingers on a strange feeling. You try to talk to them. You hint that something is wrong with time. They almost understand. Almost. Then the loop resets. Curiosity turns inward. You question yourself. Why do you remember? Why are you immune? Are you chosen or trapped? You consider the possibility that the loop is not a prison, but a mirror. It reflects your choices back at you. You ask what it wants from you. You try kindness. You try cruelty. You try silence. Nothing breaks. The loop does not punish. It waits. There are moments when the loop feels gentle. You wake with no urgency. You sit by the window. You watch the repeat of the day like a familiar film. In these moments, tranquility returns in a different form. Not the soft peace of ignorance, but the steady calm of understanding. You no longer fight the loop. You study it. You shape your place inside it. You begin to see beauty in the details you once ignored. The child's laugh at the same joke, the way light lands on a table, the rhythm of footsteps on the street. You realize repetition can hold meaning if you choose to give it. But even in calm, curiosity never dies. It nudges you. It asks what happens if you push one more time. You stand in a place you have never stood. You speak a sentence you have never spoken. You wait. The day trembles. The pattern shifts. A small change appears where there was none before. It might be a word, a breath, a new sound. It might be nothing more than someone turning their head a second late. Yet it is different. The loop is not perfect. It can evolve. That is when you stop fearing the loop. You start listening to it. You look for the threads that move when pulled. You explore not to escape, but to transform. You wake with intention. The alarm rings. You rise. You observe. You act. The day repeats, but you are not the same. Curiosity has replaced tranquility, and in that shift, the loop becomes possibility. The first reset felt like forgiveness. I made a mistake in the morning. Something small, like saying the wrong thing to a friend. And by night, I wished I could take it back. Then I woke up, and the mistake never happened. The same sun, the same time, the same chance. I spoke the right words instead. I felt relief. The loop gave me control. It felt like a gift, but control changes how you think. At first, I used resets to fix simple things. If I was late, I adjusted my route. If I broke something, I avoided it the next time. If I hurt someone's feelings, I rewrote the conversation until it landed well. Every day became an edit. Every action became a draft. I believed I could shape the perfect version of life if I just tried enough times. Perfection is a trap. The more I tried to correct, the more I noticed what was wrong. I heard every flaw in my voice. I saw every reaction on people's faces. I replayed interactions until nothing felt natural. When you know you can redo something, you stop trusting yourself the first time. You become cautious. You plan every word. You lose spontaneity. Fixing small choices helped at first, but it made me fear them too. I started to wonder if the loop was training me or testing me. Then I moved beyond the small things. I tried changing bigger events. A disagreement between neighbors, a car accident at noon, a store robbery at night. I stepped in. I redirected people. I warned them. Sometimes I stopped the outcome. Sometimes the loop forced it to happen anyway. Even when I failed, I woke up knowing I could try again. Responsibility grew heavy. Once you know you can help, it hurts when you don't. The loop made every inaction feel like guilt. It was no longer enough to correct mistakes. I had to prevent them. But preventing one problem often caused another. If I delayed someone to avoid the accident, they missed something important. If I stopped the robbery, someone else got blamed. The world compensated like it was balancing unseen variables. Each reset taught me that improving one part of the day could break another. I learned that choices ripple. Curiosity pushed me further. Could I change the tone of the entire day? Could I make everyone happier? I tried orchestrating events like a conductor. I set up conversations. I guided people into new paths. On some loops, the day felt lighter. People smiled more. I felt proud. But the next morning, everything reset. The extra warmth vanished. The effort disappeared. My work left no trace. That was the moment I understood. Progress could not be stored. Only lessons could. The loop was memory without consequence. But memory alone carries weight. I knew things no one else did. I carried grief from days that never happened for anyone else. I remembered arguments people never had. I remembered deaths they never experienced. My mind felt full of ghosts. I needed rest, but the loop did not allow true rest. It only allowed restart. When you carry knowledge no one else shares, you feel separate. I tried explaining the loop to people. They laughed or grew concerned. One person listened carefully. For a moment, I thought they believed me. The next reset, they looked at me like a stranger. Hope faded. I stopped trying to be understood. Once isolation sets in, bigger mistakes follow. You begin to question limits. If nothing lasts, why hold back? You test boundaries. You see how far you can push people before the day resets. You explore darker impulses, because the loop feels like a shield. You tell harsh truths without care. You take what you want. You stop filtering your thoughts. You stop pretending to be kind. Some loops you ruin just to see what breaks. And everything breaks. The first time I caused real harm on purpose, it shook me. Not because others remembered, no one did, but because I did. I carried the memory. I saw the fear I caused. I felt the regret even after the world returned to normal. The loop did not erase guilt. It preserved it. Pain became mine alone. Resets offer endless chances, but they do not choose for you. They reveal who you are without consequences. That is more dangerous than any punishment. When the future cannot hold you accountable, the only barrier is your own morality. And morality bends when stretched long enough. I tried living without extremes. I ignored the loop, pretending each day was final. It worked for a while. I stopped fixing things. I stopped interfering. I followed routines. I let the day pass with minimal impact. It felt peaceful at first, then empty. The loop did not punish me, but it made the world dull. Doing nothing was worse than failing. I realized growth requires action, even when the outcome resets. So I returned to choice, but I did it differently. I stopped aiming for perfection. I focused on intention. I helped when it felt right, not to control the result. I accepted that some events would repeat no matter what I did. I let people act as they would, even if I knew the path. I used the loop as practice, not as correction. Each reset became rehearsal. I built skills, not outcomes. Some days I still made mistakes. Some days I caused harm without meaning to. But I faced it. I learned from it. I entered the next reset with honesty, not fear. Eventually, I saw that each loop held both opportunity and risk. It was never only a chance to fix or ruin. It was proof that choice still mattered, even when time did not. The loop never told me when I was done. It never announced its purpose. It only offered another morning, another version of myself, another test of what I would do with freedom. Correct small choices, make bigger mistakes, learn which mattered more. In the end, the reset was not a clean slate. It was a mirror. It showed me every version of who I could be. It reminded me that even if the world resets, I do not. I carry every attempt, every success, every failure. And the person I wake up as tomorrow depends on the choices I make today, even if no one else remembers them. A loop always starts with a thought. Maybe this time will be different. You wake up, breathe in, and plan every move like you are diffusing something fragile. You pick your words with care. You walk on mental eggshells. You think through every outcome as if you can outsmart the day. You try a new angle. You speak softer. You speak louder. You avoid conflict. You confront it. You offer kindness. You stay distant. You bend and twist your choices in every direction. Yet by the time the sun sets, the result feels the same. The rhythm of the day drags you back to the same point. The loop resets. You start again. Overthinking works the same way. It promises control. It tells you that if you analyze every path, you will avoid pain. It convinces you that delay is wisdom. You replay conversations in your head the way you replay them in the loop. You believe that the perfect version of yourself hides in the next attempt. You rewrite sentences before you speak them. You plan responses before someone finishes talking. You try to predict reactions like you have a script, but life refuses to follow prediction. The more you plan, the less natural you feel. You start sounding rehearsed. You start hesitating. You start fearing the unknown. You live in mental loops and call it preparation. The loop is a physical version of that cycle. You can change every detail and still land in the same place. You try waking earlier. You try staying quiet. You try telling the truth. You try lying. You try walking left instead of right. Somehow, the same conflict appears. The same argument erupts. The same disappointment sinks in. When outcomes repeat despite effort, you start to believe the problem is you. You think you just have not found the right strategy. You think if you think harder, you will solve it. But thinking is the cage. Imagine someone in the loop trying to avoid making someone upset. They plan the conversation down to the breath. They choose neutral words. They smile at the right time. Yet the other person reacts with the same frustration. The loop resets. They try the opposite. They withdraw and say nothing. The other person still reacts with frustration. The loop resets. It does not matter if they change tone, timing, or topic. The result remains. That is the core of overthinking. Different actions, same outcome, same fear repeating. Overthinking tells you there must be a perfect choice. The loop teaches you there may not be. Not because change is impossible, but because outcomes do not rely on you alone. Other people carry their own loops, their own patterns, their own triggers. You cannot think your way into controlling their reactions. The loop exposes this truth without mercy. When the same result appears no matter how you behave, you realize control is an illusion. You see how much energy you waste calculating every move. You see how much life you miss while trying to prevent discomfort. In the loop, you start to notice that the day itself is not the enemy. The problem is your belief that you can fix it with the right formula. You become exhausted trying to engineer perfection. You lose the ability to act without planning. You become a spectator in your own life, analyzing instead of living. Overthinking replicates this state. You replay the past, you predict the future, you stall in the present. The more you think, the less you do. At some point in the loop, something shifts. You stop focusing on outcomes and start paying attention to patterns. You notice that despite repeated actions, the emotional core of the day remains. If you enter the day with fear, it ends with fear. If you begin with resentment, it ends with resentment. The loop reflects your mindset more than your actions. Overthinking is the same. You can change the external move, but if the internal state stays anxious, the result feels unchanged. Different actions, same route. Same route, same outcome. You begin to experiment differently. Instead of trying to control everything, you let go of the script. You act with intention, not calculation. You say what you mean. You accept that discomfort might happen. You stop trying to please everyone. At first, the result still looks the same. Conflict still arises. People still misunderstand. The loop still resets. But something inside you feels different. The weight lifts. The exhaustion fades. Decisions become lighter. You feel present instead of trapped in prediction. The loop stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like feedback. When you overthink, you treat every choice like a test you must pass. In the loop, you learn that every choice is just data. If it goes wrong, it resets. If it goes right, it resets. Either way, you learn. You stop asking, "How do I avoid mistakes?" and start asking, "What does this teach me?" That shift breaks the cycle more than any perfect plan. Some outcomes begin to change, not because you forced them, but because you stopped forcing them. The loop reacts when you stop fighting it. There are days when you still fall into old habits. You overthink, you hesitate, you replay the day, even though you know it will replay itself. But each time, you recognize the cycle sooner. You see the pattern instead of drowning in it. You understand that trying a different action does not matter if you carry the same fear. The real loop is internal. Time only mirrors it. The metaphor becomes clear. Overthinking is a time loop without the rewind button. You stand still while your mind circles. You believe you are making progress because you explore options, but you never take a step. Different actions stay in your head. The result stays the same because thought without motion changes nothing. The loop in time shows you what the loop in thought hides. To break the loop, you must act without knowing the ending. You must allow surprise. You must accept that some outcomes will repeat until you change from the inside. Not by choosing different words, but by releasing the need to control. When you stop demanding certainty, the loop loses power. When you stop trying to think your way to safety, you begin to move. The loop becomes a metaphor for overthinking because both trap you in repetition. Both convince you that more analysis is the answer. Both drain your energy while promising control. But the loop in time can be broken by a shift in mind. And the loop in mind can be broken by a single honest moment of action. Different actions do not always make a different result, but a different mindset does. The first time the day repeated, I thought it was a glitch. I woke up with the same light in the window, the same sound outside, the same message on my phone. At first, it felt like déjà vu stretched too long. I treated it like a problem to solve. Something must have gone wrong in my actions. I just had to do something different to fix it. So I changed the event I thought was the cause. One day, I avoided a conversation. The loop still reset. The next day, I forced the conversation. It reset again. I tried being early. I tried being late. I tried helping someone I ignored the first time. I tried staying home the entire day. I thought if I could find the key event, I could prevent the reset. But the day kept snapping back like a rubber band. It didn't matter if I rewired the schedule. Something deeper held it in place. You start thinking there must be a specific moment, a fight, a failure, a choice, a trigger that locks the loop. You treat the day like a puzzle. You move the pieces, you experiment, you calculate, you intervene. But no matter how clever you get, time does not care about the surface. You stop looking at what happens and begin asking why it keeps happening. The loop teaches through repetition. It shows you patterns you didn't want to see. You notice the tension in your voice even when nothing is wrong. You catch the way you avoid eye contact with certain people. You feel heaviness in places where you pretend to be fine. The events are loud, but the emotions underneath are louder. The loop forces you to confront not what happened, but how you feel about what happened. There was someone I avoided speaking to. It wasn't because of what they said. It was because of what it stirred in me. Guilt, shame, fear. I kept trying to fix the situation by adjusting the conversation, changing my tone, my timing, my words. Every version failed. The loop didn't care if the conversation went smoothly. It cared that I kept running from the feeling behind it. I was afraid to admit I had hurt them. I was afraid to be honest about why. The loop stayed in place until I faced the truth. I wasn't avoiding them. I was avoiding myself. Once you see this, you recognize it everywhere. A person keeps making the same mistake, not because they don't know better, but because they haven't admitted why they make it. Someone stays angry, not because of the argument happening today, but because of the wound from years ago they refuse to name. The loop holds people in place until they stop hiding from the root emotion. It doesn't matter if you change the script. The story returns until you understand the theme. I tested this with others in the loop. I watched a man argue with his brother every time. Different topics, same bitterness. I tried changing the words they used. I tried interrupting. I tried separating them. No change. One day, I stopped trying to prevent the fight and simply listened. Beneath the anger, I heard grief. The argument was never about the topic. It was about something left unsaid. The next loop, I pulled the younger brother aside and asked what he was really afraid of. He broke down. When he faced that fear, the argument didn't happen. For the first time, their day changed. It wasn't the event. It was the emotion buried under it. But emotional truth is not something you can force out of others until you learn to face your own. I tried helping everyone else before looking inward. It didn't work. The loop mirrored me. Every time I thought I was fixing the world, it reset, showing me that I wasn't still. I was moving around the real issue, my refusal to feel. I said I was fine. I said the past didn't matter. I said I forgave myself. All lies. The loop doesn't accept lies, even if you believe them. The day I finally broke was quiet. No big event, no argument, no crisis. I sat alone and let the truth surface without pushing it back down. I admitted I was angry. I admitted I was scared. I admitted I was holding on to things I pretended were gone. The emotions were messy, not poetic. They didn't solve everything, but they were real. I felt them without editing. I didn't try to fix them. I didn't try to outrun them. I let myself feel small, human, unfinished. When I woke the next morning, the light in the window felt different. The air held new weight. Someone walked by my house at a different time. The smallest shifts told me the loop had loosened. It didn't shatter, it bent. The day still followed patterns, but now they moved with more freedom. I hadn't changed the schedule. I had changed my heart. Loops inside people work the same. You relive the same conflicts, even with new people. You end up in the same relationship dynamic, even when the faces change. You face the same fear, even when the situation looks different. You call it bad luck, you call it fate, but it isn't. It's the same emotional truth asking to be faced. You cannot escape it with logic. You cannot solve it with new tactics. You have to feel it. Some loops end when you forgive someone. Some end when you forgive yourself. Some end when you admit you are hurt. Some end when you accept love. Some end when you stop pretending you don't care. The day doesn't need a different event. It needs a different level of honesty. Time repeats because emotion resists. Once the resistance breaks, time moves. The loop isn't about control. It's about awareness. It's about noticing when your actions do not match your heart. It's about knowing when you are playing a role instead of being real. It's about understanding that events are noise, but emotions are the signal. When you finally face what you feel, the world changes, not because time has shifted, but because you have. The first time I realized the day was repeating, it didn't scare me. It felt like extra time. No consequences. No deadlines. I woke up with a clean slate and thought I could use it to perfect everything. If I failed, the loop would give me another try. I treated it like a gift. But gifts become burdens when you don't know why you receive them. Over time, the loop stopped feeling endless in a freeing way and started feeling endless in a trapping way. Infinity sounds large until you are stuck in it. When every morning starts in the same room, at the same second, with the same air inside your lungs, infinity becomes small. The world shrinks to a routine you cannot escape. Even if the map stays wide, the path feels narrow. You can walk the streets for miles. You can travel as far as transportation allows. You can talk to every person in town, but none of it expands anything. All roads lead back to the same morning. You begin to feel the walls, even if you can't see them. Claustrophobia isn't about physical space. It's about the absence of change. You can live in a mansion and still feel trapped if nothing evolves. Every repeated day starts to press inward. Routine piles on top of routine until time feels heavier than stone. You know what every hour will bring. You can predict every conversation. You can recite the world like a script. It isn't comfort, it's erosion. When nothing moves forward, even breathing feels like pretending. What makes it worse is not knowing the purpose. If the loop had rules, I could follow them. If it had a goal, I could aim. If someone told me, when you learn this lesson, the loop will end, I'd feel grounded. But the loop stays silent. It gives no guidance. It never explains itself. It resets whether I do everything right or everything wrong. It does not react to kindness or cruelty. It does not acknowledge growth or collapse. It simply restarts. That silence is the true prison. Without purpose, effort loses meaning. I tried self-improvement. I read books. I learned skills. I mastered languages. I became an expert in everything I touched. None of it mattered. I woke up and the world forgot. No one remembered the person I became. They greeted me like I was starting from zero. Being the only one who grows feels more isolating than never growing at all. Progress without recognition tastes like air. I tried helping people. I saved lives. I prevented disasters. I resolved conflicts before they occurred. My actions changed each day in the moment, but the next morning erased everything. The same accident returned. The same argument reignited. The same tears fell. The loop did not care about outcomes. It cared about repetition. When the world does not save your impact, you start to question whether action matters. Even doing good becomes heavy when it never leads anywhere. I tried doing nothing. I stayed in bed. I let the day pass without touching it. I watched the world from a window. Time still rewound. Even passivity did not matter. That was the moment I understood something painful. Whether I fought or surrendered, the loop did not respond. It was not a negotiation. It was not interactive, it simply existed, and that made me feel small. Purpose is tied to influence. When you cannot shape anything, you begin to feel like you do not exist. People assume fear in loops comes from repetition. It doesn't. It comes from isolation. You could endure cycles if someone endured them with you, but no one else remembers. I tried telling people. They brushed it off. I begged them to notice patterns. They laughed. I tested them with future events. Even when they reacted with shock, the next day they forgot. I held thousands of memories in my head while everyone else held one day. There is nothing more suffocating than being surrounded by people and still being alone. Sometimes I searched for signs. Maybe the loop was waiting for a choice. Maybe there was a specific moment I kept missing. I replayed days like detective work, expecting a clue. I slowed down. I paid attention. I documented everything in my mind. I experimented with moral decisions, honesty, forgiveness, vulnerability. Some days felt lighter, but the loop held. Even growth felt unanswered. I started to think the loop had no purpose. It was just there, and living without purpose is worse than any prison. People say infinite time means infinite possibility. They are wrong. Infinite time without direction turns possibility into noise. With no finish line, motivation decays, goals dissolve, energy fades. You begin to move not because you want to, but because doing nothing feels worse. You become a machine running routines. You smile at people even though you know their response. You pretend to care about events you have seen 100 times. You perform life instead of living it. The loop becomes a stage. You become an actor. The audience never changes. There were moments I thought the loop was testing me emotionally. Maybe it wanted me to feel something real. Maybe it wanted me to stop pretending. I tried facing every fear. I confronted my guilt. I apologized where I could. I allowed myself to grieve. For a brief time, I felt peace, but peace was temporary. The loop reset anyway. That was the hardest part, realizing the loop did not end when I grew. It only kept reflecting me back at myself. So I asked a new question. If the loop never ends, how do I live inside it without breaking? I stopped looking for escape and started searching for meaning in the moment, even if it wouldn't last. I spoke honestly, even if they forgot. I helped people, even if the help vanished. I allowed joy, even if it reset. I treated each version of the day like it mattered, to me, not to time. Purpose stopped being external. It became internal. The loop did not change. I did. Still, even with that mindset, there are days where the walls close in, when the same morning light feels like chains, when my chest tightens because I already know what will happen. When I want the sun to rise even 1 second later, just to prove that time is alive. I can endure repetition. I can endure isolation. But existing without clear purpose tests something deeper than strength. It tests identity. Even infinite space becomes tight when there is nowhere new to go. Even endless time becomes heavy when you cannot move forward. The mind does not need bars to feel trapped. It only needs uncertainty about why it is still here. The loop is endless, but endurance is not. A day resets. The world forgets, but I don't. Memory becomes the one thing the loop cannot touch. At first, it feels like an advantage. Everyone around me moves through the same events as if they are new, while I walk with certainty. I know which street is blocked. I know which conversation will turn awkward. I know who needs help before they even realize it. Predictability feels like power. I make better decisions. I navigate problems with ease. I step aside before anything falls. It feels like a secret skill no one else has, but memory grows heavy. Even when time resets, the emotional weight of each day stays in me. If someone cries, I carry it. If someone dies, they return the next morning, but not for me. I still remember the sound of their voice fading. I still remember the panic. I still remember the pain. They smile at me like nothing happened, and I have to pretend I didn't watch them fall apart the day before. There is no clean slate in my mind. Memory becomes a library of versions, of people, of places, of myself. I meet someone kind one day and cruel the next. I see every angle of their personality as the loops pile up. They do not know I've witnessed their best and worst. To them, I am meeting them for the first time. To me, we are on our 100th interaction. Authenticity becomes complicated. I want to respond based on who they are today, but I can't ignore what they were yesterday. I start interacting with ghosts of people no one else sees. The burden deepens when joy resets. I share a perfect moment with someone, a deep conversation, a genuine laugh, a connection that feels real. I wake up excited to see them again. They don't remember. I greet them with warmth. They greet me with confusion. The bond existed only in my memory. I learned to stop letting myself get attached. It hurts too much to lose the same people over and over, even when they're still alive. There is no grieving process for erased moments. They don't end, they just vanish. The world acts like they never existed. Memory becomes the only proof. I hold entire histories inside me that no one else can confirm. Reality becomes flexible. I start questioning my own perception. If I remember 1,000 versions of a friendship, which one is true? If I grow as a person and the world resets, who am I compared to who they think I am? Identity drifts without witnesses. Still, memory saves me. I use it to improve. I learn skills. I study people. I predict outcomes. I avoid mistakes. I master the rhythm of the day. Memory becomes the way I navigate the loop with purpose. I collect data like a scientist. I find the best way to solve problems. I discover secrets hidden behind locked doors. I learn how to make the hardest days bearable. Without memory, I'd be stuck in ignorance forever. Knowledge gives me direction when time gives me none. But knowledge without progress turns into stagnation. Each new memory adds weight, not movement. I remember thousands of conversations, but never move past them. I remember every mistake, but cannot escape its shadow. In normal life, memory fades to protect you. In the loop, it sharpens instead. I see everything with clarity. I cannot forget. I lie awake with perfect recall of the worst moments. It drains me faster than any physical exhaustion. I try to cleanse it by forcing myself to care less. Some loops, I stop helping people. I keep my distance. I avoid conversations. I pretend none of it matters. I treat each day like background noise. But even when I disengage, memory keeps working. I still notice patterns. I still predict outcomes. You can't unknow what you know. And pretending indifference brings its own pain. You can't unfeel everything you've lived. Sometimes I use memory to find beauty. I memorize the exact way sunlight hits the street at 5 p.m. I learn the timing of a stranger's smile. I find hidden music in routines. The small things never change, but they become more meaningful when I collect them with intention. Memory allows me to build a private world of moments no reset can erase. In those moments, memory feels like a friend, one that protects joy instead of pain, but memory also isolates. I talk to people and recall every previous version of our interaction. They talk to me like we are strangers. The gap between what I know and what they know widens until it feels like I am from another planet. Even when I speak, I hold back details because I don't want to scare them. I live in the past, present, and future of every person I meet. They live in one day. Connection becomes lopsided. I carry all the weight. The deepest burden is knowing that every loop changes me, while leaving the world untouched. I have lived thousands of days. I have grown, broken, healed, and grown again. But each morning, the world greets me like I am starting fresh. I am not fresh. I am layered. I am tired. I am full of stories with no audience. When memory is only mine, it becomes both identity and prison. Yet I refuse to let it crush me. I find ways to use it with intention. I protect those who cannot see the danger ahead. I bring light to people on their hardest days. I remember for them when they cannot. Memory becomes service instead of just suffering. It allows me to make each loop matter, even when it won't last. The loop steals time, but memory returns meaning at a cost. It gives me wisdom no one else can hold. It gives me the ability to love deeper, help faster, and see clearer. But it also means I mourn what others forget. I pay the emotional bill for every day that never ends. The day resets, the world forgets, but I don't. And that is both how I survive and why I break. The first time the day repeated, I blamed time. It felt like the world had broken. The clock betrayed me. The sun mocked me. I believed if I could fix the right event or make the right decision, the loop would let me go. I chased external solutions. I saved someone from getting hurt. I prevented arguments. I solved problems. When that didn't work, I tried the opposite. I stayed out of everything. The loop ignored both efforts. It didn't care what I did on the surface. It kept dragging me back to the same morning, waiting for something deeper. I thought the loop was about control. I believed it wanted me to optimize the sequence of the day. If I mastered every pattern, maybe time would reward me. I tested every path like a scientist. I charted reactions. I learned every corner of every street. I memorized schedules, habits, emotions. I improved the world in small ways, but the day still snapped back. It was like solving the wrong puzzle. Soon, I started to resent it. I felt punished. I asked why this was happening to me. I wondered what I did to deserve it. The loop offered no explanation. It didn't argue. It didn't defend itself. It just repeated. Silence can feel louder than noise. The longer it stayed silent, the more it pushed me inward. I noticed something strange. The loop only punished my external attempts. When I forced outcomes, nothing changed. But when I changed how I reacted, not what I did, but who I was while doing it, the day felt different, even if the events stayed the same. That was the first hint. It wasn't asking me to alter the world. It was asking me to alter myself. In one loop, someone insulted me. Normally, I would defend myself or leave. This time, I stayed calm. Not fake calm, real calm. Not performance, acceptance. I didn't try to win. I didn't shrink. I understood them instead of resisting them. The conversation went in a direction I had never seen. When the day reset, I felt different, even though time didn't change. The loop was reflecting me back to myself. I tested the idea. When I faced fear instead of avoiding it, the loop softened. When I stopped manipulating people and started listening to them, the day didn't fight me. When I stopped running from my guilt and let myself feel it fully, the loop grew quiet. These changes didn't fix events, they fixed me, and that mattered more than any external solution. The loop was not holding me hostage. It was holding a mirror. I looked back at every moment I tried to solve. In each one, the real conflict wasn't the situation. It was my refusal to face myself. The fight I kept having wasn't about words. It was about pride. The person I couldn't save wasn't about timing. It was about accepting I couldn't control everything. The loneliness I felt wasn't about isolation. It was about never being honest. Every event was just a stage where the same emotional truth tried to perform. I kept rewriting the script instead of understanding the character. The loop didn't end when I made the perfect choices. It ended when I stopped performing, when I stopped pretending, when I stopped carrying an identity built on defense and fear, when I let myself become someone new, not for the loop, not for other people, but for myself. Time responded to that. Change inside the loop didn't look glamorous. It wasn't a single speech or a heroic act. It was small decisions I couldn't hide from. It was saying I was wrong. It was allowing grief. It was forgiving others even when they wouldn't remember. It was forgiving myself even when I didn't feel like I deserved it. Growth in the loop wasn't about achieving something. It was about releasing something. One day, the person I used to be simply didn't wake up. The alarm went off as usual, but I didn't reach for it with the same instinct. I didn't rush into the script. I paused. I breathed. I felt peace, not because the day was different, but because I was. I walked through the morning without pretending to be in control. I didn't force conversations. I didn't avoid them either. I showed up as myself. The world responded in ways I'd never seen. People spoke differently. The day flowed, not in a perfect way, but in an honest way. When the sun set, I didn't feel dread. I didn't feel the need to fix one more thing. I didn't feel unfinished. I sat in stillness without resistance. I didn't even think about the loop. For the first time, I was not waiting for tomorrow to rescue me. Then I woke up. The light in the window was new. Not brighter, not louder, just new. Someone walked by my house at the wrong time. A sound I had never heard echoed down the street. The loop had ended, but time didn't announce it. It just slipped forward like it had been waiting for me. It didn't end because I solved the day. It ended because I changed the person living it. Most people think loops break when the event changes, when the right thing happens, when the right choice is made. But the loop isn't about events. It uses events as reflection. It keeps you in the same places until you grow beyond them. It isn't punishing you for doing things wrong. It's waiting for you to stop hiding. Time doesn't move until you do. Not externally, internally. Loops end when you become someone who no longer needs them. A loop made me believe perfection was the goal. When time reset again and again, I assumed it was because I hadn't done the day exactly right. I obsessed over small details. I rehearsed conversations until I delivered every line without hesitation. I adjusted my tone, timing, actions, and even facial expressions. I prevented every mistake I could find. Still, I woke up at the same starting point. It didn't matter how clean or careful I was. The loop stayed. Perfection felt logical. If the day kept repeating, I must be failing some hidden criteria. Maybe if I saved the right person, told the truth at the right moment, or acted noble enough, time would move forward. So I chased flawless days. But the more I chased perfection, the emptier I felt. Perfection became another form of fear. I was afraid to experiment. I was afraid to be honest. I was afraid to fail. I spent more time trying to avoid doing something wrong than actually living. The loop didn't punish my flaws, but it punished my obsession with not having any. After a while, I noticed something strange. When I stopped aiming for perfection and just kept going, I actually learned more. On days when I allowed mistakes, I discovered new options. When I relaxed control, people responded differently. When I stopped trying to micromanage outcomes, a day unfolded in ways I never saw during the perfect runs. I realized perfection wasn't progress, it was paralysis. Persistence looked different. It wasn't about repeating the same attempt over and over. It was about staying engaged even when outcomes didn't change. Some loops I woke up tired. I didn't want to try. But I tried anyway, not to win, but to witness. I kept showing up. I helped people even when the help wouldn't last. I learned skills even when no one would remember. I stayed mentally present even when there was no reward. Persistence wasn't dramatic, it was quiet. It was refusing to shut down. The universe didn't respond to my best performances. It responded when I kept moving forward through boredom, frustration, and uncertainty. There were days I felt like nothing I did mattered. But every time I chose to keep going instead of collapsing into apathy, something subtle in the loop shifted. Not the events, my perception. I started to see deeper layers. I started to notice why people made the choices they did. I understood patterns beneath the surface. I stopped reacting and started understanding. In one loop, I spent an entire day trying to help someone avoid making a self-destructive decision. I tried logic, encouragement, distraction, every tactic I could think of. Nothing worked. The loop reset. The next day, I tried again. I didn't stop just because I failed. On the 10th attempt, they opened up to me. They didn't change their mind, but they let me in. It wasn't victory. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Persistence created trust. Perfection never did. Perfection is selfish. It's about how you look and whether you succeed. Persistence is selfless. It's about staying present even when success isn't guaranteed. Persistence accepts that effort matters, even if the outcome doesn't. The universe seemed less interested in flawless performance and more interested in whether I could continue without guarantees. At some point, I realized perfection is rigid. Persistence is flexible. In the loop, perfection made me repeat the same idea again and again, trying to polish it. Persistence allowed me to experiment with new ideas even if they failed. Perfection feared mistakes. Persistence used them. Perfection tried to control people. Persistence respected them. Perfection demanded certainty. Persistence lived without it. The universe rewarded growth, not precision. It kept placing me in situations where the right answer changed based on who I was becoming. Early in the loop, an act of bravery looked like speaking up. Later, bravery looked like staying silent and listening. Early in the loop, strength looked like fixing problems. Later, strength looked like letting people face their own. The loop didn't want me to perfect one version of myself. It wanted me to evolve through many. Some days I broke down. I felt exhausted. I questioned why I kept trying when nothing changed. But every time I got back up, even after collapsing, the loop felt less oppressive. Not because the day changed, but because I did. Persistence wasn't only about action. It was about refusing to disconnect from purpose. Even when the loop made life feel meaningless, I tried to create meaning inside it. I acted with intention. I anchored myself in small truths instead of perfect outcomes. There was a moment that changed everything. I had a day where nothing went right. I made mistakes, said the wrong things, and felt like I had learned nothing. I went to bed feeling like a failure. But before the reset, I noticed something. I didn't give up. I stayed emotionally present. I didn't numb myself. I felt everything. I still cared. When I woke up the next morning, something in the air felt lighter. That was when I understood. The universe wasn't judging me by success. It was watching to see if I was still willing to participate. Persistence also taught me humility. I stopped believing I could force solutions. I started focusing on being honest in each moment rather than manipulating the outcome. I asked questions instead of assuming. I allowed others to help me instead of trying to be the hero. I let myself be changed by the day instead of trying to conquer it. Persistence meant being open, not just being strong. The loop didn't end on my best day. It ended on a day that was imperfect but honest. I didn't save everyone. I didn't do everything right. I didn't solve every problem. But I showed up with courage. I stayed adaptable. I accepted uncertainty. I tried, failed, learned, and tried again without resentment. I didn't force progress. I allowed it, and the next morning, time finally moved forward. Perfection is about controlling outcomes. Persistence is about continuing the journey, even when outcomes don't obey. The universe waits to see which one you choose. First time the day repeated, I didn't notice the patterns. I only noticed the shock. The world looked the same, but my memory didn't match the moment. Someone said the exact words they said yesterday, with the same tone and timing. A cup fell off the counter at the same second as before. A dog barked in perfect sync with the mail truck. I thought it was coincidence, until the loop kept happening. Once I accepted it, something strange occurred. I began to see the structure beneath daily life. Time loops strip away noise. At first, every day feels random. People seem unpredictable. Events feel chaotic. But when you see the same day over and over, the randomness dissolves. The same behaviors appear in the same places. The same arguments follow the same progression. The same distractions pull people in. Reality has a rhythm, and the loop makes it impossible to ignore. I began to notice morning routines like choreography. The neighbor across the street always leaves at 7:15 a.m. He locks the door twice. He checks his phone before stepping off the porch. The couple on the corner argues quietly every Thursday. Not because of a big issue, but because one of them is tired of not being heard. The argument isn't about dishes, it's about respect. Patterns hide inside repetition, and time loops magnify them. Some patterns were comforting. The older man who buys flowers every afternoon, even when no one thanks him. The barista who remembers everyone's order, but her own name tag is always flipped backward. The kid who pretends to forget his lunch so his mom will hug him again. When days repeat, you see the meaning behind actions that once looked ordinary. People are more transparent than they think. Other patterns were darker. The same person who smiled at everyone always sat alone at night. The cheerful coworker always paused before laughing, like she was waiting for permission. The man who made rude comments in meetings did it at the same moment every loop, as soon as someone sounded confident. It wasn't random. It was insecurity disguised as power. Time loops reveal that most conflict comes from fear, not malice. Even accidents followed patterns. A spill, a crash, a missed opportunity. I tried preventing them. I moved objects, warned people, changed timing. Sometimes it worked, but the mistake would show up somewhere else later. It was like the loop was teaching me something. The event isn't the pattern, the mindset is. Someone who rushes will trip eventually. Someone who avoids responsibility will cause problems in a different way. Someone who never speaks up will always lose chances. Changing the moment doesn't fix the pattern. Understanding the why does. The deeper I looked, the more I realized that everyday life runs on loops, even without time resetting. People wake up thinking the same thoughts. They repeat the same habits. They react the same way to pressure. They choose comfort over change, even when it hurts them. The loop only made it obvious. I watched people repeat the same emotional mistakes. They apologized without changing. They blamed others. They ran from problems. They chased distractions. Different versions of the day, same internal cycle. But the hardest patterns to see were my own. At first, I focused on others because it was easier. Then the loop forced me inward. I reacted the same way to stress every time. I avoided certain conversations. I tried to control everything. I wanted to be understood, but refused to be vulnerable. I tried to save people so I could feel valuable. The loop didn't trap me. I trapped myself. Time only revealed what I refused to see. Once I admitted that, new layers appeared. Emotions had patterns. Fear came in predictable waves. Guilt resurfaced in the same situations. Joy appeared most when I stopped planning. Even silence had meaning. The loop made me realize how many of my choices were automatic. how little of my life was intentional. Time wasn't the prison, habit was. Patterns aren't just personal, they're collective. Entire communities cycle in the same conflicts. Cities rise and fall in predictable rhythms. People repeat history because they never notice the loops built into their beliefs. In normal life, time moves too fast to recognize it. But when time stops, you see everything. The loop became a microscope for human nature. Some patterns felt unbreakable. Every loop, a certain friend drifted away by the afternoon. No matter how I changed events, it happened. One day, instead of chasing them, I asked myself why. I realized I only reached out when I needed support, but didn't offer my own. The pattern wasn't fate, it was me. When I changed, not my words, but my intentions, the friendship lasted longer. The loop didn't end, but the dynamic shifted. Patterns are clues, not cages. The most surprising pattern was how change actually starts. It doesn't happen in grand moments. It happens in small choices repeated. A moment of honesty, a pause before reacting, a decision to stay instead of run. The same way negative patterns build over time, positive ones do too. The loop helped me test them. Over time, certain events started to evolve. People said new things. The rhythm shifted. It was proof that patterns can be rewritten, but only from the inside out. The loop wasn't just a reset device. It was a spotlight. It showed me that most of life is made of repeated behavior. The question wasn't how to escape the loop. The question was, which patterns are worth keeping and which ones need to break? When I understood that, the loop felt less like a prison and more like a map. Each repeated day wasn't a failure. It was feedback. Time loops reveal hidden patterns because patterns reveal truth. And once you see truth, you can never unsee it. A loop isn't always punishment. It can feel heavy, yes. It can trap you in repetition and force you to confront things you'd rather ignore. But not every loop is cruel. Some loops give you space to breathe, to try, to practice without consequence. Sometimes the loop is kind, a rehearsal room disguised as routine. The first time I noticed this, I wasn't trying to escape. I was trying to improve. I remembered a conversation that ended badly the day before. Normally, I would carry that regret for years, but in the loop, I got another shot. I said the same words with more care. I listened better. I didn't rush to defend myself. The conversation unfolded differently. It felt healing. Even though the loop erased it the next morning, it still changed something inside me. I grew from it. I realized I could practice being better without fear of ruining anything permanently. Failure lost its weight in the loop. In normal life, mistakes stick to you. You replay them. You hide from them. You build your identity around avoiding them. But when time resets, mistakes become information. I could try something bold, see the outcome and adjust. I could experiment with courage. I could say what I was afraid to say. If it went wrong, I learned. If it went right, I learned. The loop turned fear into curiosity. Practice became powerful. I used the loops to build skills. I learned how to cook without burning things. I played the piano until my fingers moved without thought. I read entire libraries because time didn't punish patience. I studied people, not to manipulate them, but to understand them. I could observe how someone responded to kindness or honesty. I could test different approaches to communication. I discovered that empathy is a skill, not just a trait. The loop gave me room to develop it. Growth felt safe because the loop protected others from my learning curve. When I made selfish choices, the loop reset before the consequences hurt anyone long term. When I tried to be vulnerable, I could redo it until I found courage that felt real. I could confront my flaws without judgment from others, because they never remembered. The loop removed the fear of being seen while imperfect. It allowed me to become someone better before the world saw the change. There was a day I practiced apology. I had never been good at apologizing. I used to defend myself or make excuses. In one loop, I tried saying sorry directly. It came out wrong. The next loop, I added honesty. Better, but still stiff. The next, I added empathy. Eventually, I apologized in a way that felt true. The other person softened. We connected. Even though that connection disappeared the next morning, I knew I had learned something real: how to repair, not just avoid. The loop also helped me understand things I used to rush past. In real time, life moves fast and forces you forward. You don't always understand what people mean until it's too late. But in the loop, I could slow down. I could hear what wasn't said. I could notice body language, hesitation, gratitude, pain. I started seeing the inner world behind people's behavior. The loop trained me to observe, not just react. It even helped me with patience. Growth is slow. In a normal timeline, slow progress feels frustrating, but in the loop, progress becomes visible because you stack it day after day. You can feel yourself changing even when the world doesn't. That's rare. Most people grow without realizing it until years later. In the loop, I could measure my own evolution. Some loops gave me peace. There were days I stopped trying to fix or control anything. I let the day unfold naturally. I sat in silence. I watched the sunrise like it was new. The loop let me find comfort in stillness. I didn't have to race. I didn't have to perform. I could rest in familiarity. Safety became a tool, not a trap. Repetition gave me emotional stability, so I could focus on deeper transformation without being overwhelmed. The loop even helped me face grief. In normal life, you only get one final conversation. In the loop, I could sit with someone who would one day be gone and learn to say what mattered. I could practice letting go. I could honor their presence over and over until I understood the value of time with them. The loop didn't erase love, it intensified it. I learned not to waste moments, even if they would reset. Eventually, I realized growth in the loop wasn't about becoming perfect. It was about becoming honest. Each loop gave me another chance to choose differently, not because I was forced, but because I wanted to. I started to act with intention, not fear. I became more patient with others. I became more patient with myself. I didn't need to get it right on the first try. I just needed to keep trying. The loop wasn't always kind. Some days it pushed hard, but the kindness was in the opportunity. The loop believed in repetition as a path to transformation. It didn't shame me for failing. It gave me space to learn. It treated growth as practice, not performance. Sometimes the universe doesn't give you more time. It gives you the same time until you become someone who uses it well. In that sense, the loop acted like a teacher who never lost hope. It didn't free me when I made the perfect choices. It freed me when I became someone who could grow without being afraid of starting over. Sometimes the loop is kind, not because it removes struggle, but because it lets you rehearse becoming who you were meant to be, without fear of breaking the world in the process. The loop can be soft when it wants you to grow, but it can also be brutal when you refuse. It doesn't always offer gentle lessons or safe rehearsal. Sometimes it drags you back to the worst moment of the day and forces you to live it again, not because it enjoys your pain, but because you won't face it on your own. The loop becomes cruel when you keep running from something your soul knows you need to confront. Trauma in the loop doesn't fade, it multiplies. In a normal life, time pulls you away from pain. Days pass, people change, memories blur. Even if the wound still exists, distance gives you room to breathe. But in a time loop, there is no distance. You wake up in the same bed with the same weight in your chest. You know what's coming. You know where the pain will strike. You try to stop it, avoid it, escape it, but it always finds you. The loop remembers what the world forgets. There was a moment in my loop that broke me. Something happened to someone I cared about. I saw it coming too late. I tried to fix it the next day, and the next, and the next. Each time, the outcome barely changed, or if it changed, something worse replaced it. The trauma didn't just replay, it expanded. The loop refused to let me bury it. Even when I tried to distract myself or change focus, the loop twisted events and pulled me right back to it. It was like time refused to let me look away. At first, I thought I was being punished. I accused the loop of cruelty. I asked why it kept torturing me. But trauma isn't always a single moment. It's the meaning we attach to it. I wanted to fix the event. The loop wanted me to feel the truth. I kept trying to prevent what happened outside me. The loop wanted me to heal what broke inside me. I was angry. I felt powerless. I blamed myself. I blamed others. I blamed fate. All of that was easier than facing the raw grief underneath. Healing isn't logical inside the loop. The day resets, but feelings do not. You can't schedule healing. You can't strategize your way out of pain. The loop will drag you back until you stop trying to outthink it and start allowing yourself to feel. That is what makes it cruel. Growth through trauma is not neat. It is messy, repetitive, exhausting. Sometimes it takes hundreds of loops to even admit you are hurting. Some days I screamed at the sky. Other days I shut down and let life pass without touching me. Numbness became my survival method, but the loop punished numbness too. Avoidance made the pain sharper the next time. Silence made the trauma louder. Denial gave it more power. The loop forced me to relive the wound not to break me, but because I refused to let it heal properly. I treated trauma like a problem to solve. It was actually a truth to accept. At one point, I tried to skip the traumatic moment entirely. I left town. I hid in isolated places. I refused to speak to anyone. The loop still recreated the pain through different people and different events. I learned something terrifying. Trauma isn't trapped in one situation. It lives in your body until you free it. The loop mirrored my internal state until I could no longer pretend it wasn't there. I thought healing meant never feeling the pain again. The loop taught me healing means being able to feel the pain without shutting down. It means letting yourself grieve, even when you don't know how long it will take. In one loop, instead of trying to change the event, I sat with it. I stayed present. I didn't try to fix it. I didn't try to run. I let myself cry in front of someone. I told the truth without shaping it. I asked for help instead of pretending I was strong. It felt like breaking, but it was the first real step to mending. The trauma didn't vanish the next day. The loop didn't magically end, but something shifted. My reaction changed. The fear loosened. The guilt softened. The memory hurt, but it no longer felt like a weapon pressed against me. It felt like a scar forming where an open wound once was. The loop stopped hitting me with the same intensity. I could breathe in the painful moment without collapsing. That was the loop's version of progress. Reliving trauma in a loop teaches you how trauma actually works in real life. People carry the same pain through different years, different relationships, different cities. They relive it even without time magic. They find themselves in the same emotional situations even when the details change. Time moves forward physically, but emotionally, many people are trapped in loops of their own mind. The difference is that they don't know why. In a time loop, at least you can see it clearly. The cruelest part is that the loop will not let you move on until you move through. It waits. It repeats. It tightens the walls until you face what you've buried. It won't allow you to numb forever. It will push you to scream, to feel, to admit, to forgive, to let go. Healing isn't about forgetting the pain. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself that pain stole. Sometimes, the loop ends not when the trauma disappears, but when your relationship to it changes. The day doesn't have to become perfect. You don't have to erase what happened. You just have to stop letting it control your identity. Trauma leaves marks, but it doesn't get to write the rest of the story. The loop feels cruel because healing feels cruel. It feels like tearing open old wounds. It feels like collapsing in slow motion. But the loop never made me feel anything I wasn't already carrying. It just refused to let me hide from it. Time itself can be kind or harsh. The loop only amplified what was already true. And sometimes, the universe forces you to relive pain, not to destroy you, but to make sure you don't abandon the parts of yourself that are still waiting to be seen, held, and healed. A time loop is the perfect test of fate and free will. When the day repeats, it's easy to believe everything is predetermined. People say the same words. Accidents happen at the same moment. Arguments unfold beat by beat, as if scripted. You watch events repeat so consistently that you start to think nothing you do matters. The feeling of destiny becomes heavy. You can't stop the sunrise. You can't stop the reset. You can't force the world to acknowledge your memory. Fate seems absolute. But then something small shifts. You move one step differently. Someone hesitates before repeating their usual line. A minor detail changes. A glass that always falls doesn't fall this time because you nudged it 1 inch. That small difference sits in your mind like a spark. If something can change, even slightly, then the loop isn't pure fate. Free will exists, but it's subtle. Not loud, not flashy. It lives in the gaps. The loop makes one thing clear. You can't control the structure of the day, but you can influence the flow inside it. Fate sets the stage. Free will writes the dialogue. You wake up at the same time. You see the same people. Certain events feel immovable, yet how you respond to them shapes everything that comes after. Say nothing, and the day feels cold. Speak honestly, and the tone shifts. The event remains, but the emotional outcome changes. Fate supplies the situation. Free will decides who you are in it. In the beginning, I fought fate. I tried to break the loop through force. I avoided certain events or tried to destroy the schedule entirely. I thought if I made enough noise, time would listen. But the loop doesn't bend to chaos. If I skipped a key moment, the loop redirected me back to it through coincidences or new paths. Even if I left town, different versions of the same emotional patterns appeared. Fate wasn't just about places, it was about lessons. And lessons don't disappear until they are learned. But the loop didn't reward blind compliance either. If I surrendered and followed the day passively, nothing changed. Fate stayed rigid. I saw the same pain repeat, the same arguments, the same failures. No matter how kind or still I tried to be, the loop ignored me. Fate wasn't mercy, it was structure. It waited for movement, not obedience. That's when I learned something important. Fate sets the conditions, but free will activates change. You can't skip the hard parts life wants you to face. You can't choose your starting point, but you can choose who you become inside the repetition. The loop responds differently, depending on the person you are. When I acted out of ego, the day resisted. When I acted out of fear, it repeated. But when I acted with awareness and courage, when I chose growth instead of comfort, the loop softened. Fate didn't dissolve, but it gave me space. Some events were fixed. No matter what I did, certain things always happened. The storm always hit at 4 p.m. That phone call always came in the morning. The person I cared about always made a painful decision. I couldn't stop these anchors. Fate held them in place like gravity. But I realized I could change how we arrived there. I could prepare someone. I could shift their emotion. I could support them so the outcome hurt less. Fate delivered the moment. Free will shaped the experience. I began seeing fate not as an enemy, but as the framework. Like the edges of a puzzle. The picture inside the puzzle, that was free will. I could place the pieces in different ways. I could try different combinations. Some fit, some didn't. But every attempt taught me more about the picture. The loop revealed the limits of both fate and free will. Fate alone creates a lifeless script where nothing matters. Free will alone creates chaos with no pattern. But in the loop, they blend into balance. Fate gives purpose. Free will gives depth. Fate provides challenge. Free will provides response. Fate creates cycles. Free will breaks them. One of the hardest truths the loop taught me was this: free will isn't about avoiding fate. It's about meeting it as a different person. The storm will still come. The loss may still occur. The loop won't erase reality just because you don't like it. But if you grow, the experience changes meaning. The same event can become suffering or transformation, depending on who you are when it arrives. Fate tests you. Free will is how you answer. Some loops ended not because I outsmarted the system, but because I changed how I used my choices. When I stopped reacting out of habit and started choosing intentionally, the day felt new even before it ended. I didn't try to control others. I didn't try to avoid hard moments. I faced them with honesty. I accepted that some things were out of my control, but refused to give up the things that weren't. I made choices aligned with who I wanted to become, not who I had been. That balance is delicate. Lean too far into fate and you become passive. Lean too far into free will and you burn out trying to force outcomes. The loop taught me to work with time instead of against it. I learned when to push and when to listen, when to act and when to wait, when to lead and when to trust. The loop stopped feeling like prison and started feeling like partnership. I used to think freedom meant the absence of boundaries. The loop taught me freedom is the power to act within them. It taught me fate is not what happens to you, it's the canvas you paint on. Free will is the brush. The picture only appears when both are present. In the end, loops are not just about repetition. They are reflections of life itself. Even without supernatural resets, people live in repeating patterns. They encounter the same emotional tests. They return to the same crossroads. Fate brings the moment back. Free will decides what you do this time. Time loops may exaggerate the structure, but the truth they reveal is universal. You cannot escape fate, but you can transform your role inside it. And sometimes, that is the difference between being trapped in the loop and being the one who finally breaks it. Time looks straight when you live it once. One moment leads to the next. Childhood becomes memory. Mistakes fade. You think in terms of before and after. Progress feels like climbing a ladder. You assume growth means leaving things behind. But when you enter a loop, that line bends. You wake up in the same place again and again. At first, it feels like being stuck in a circle. You think you're going nowhere, but then you notice something. The day repeats, but you don't. You change. Your understanding deepens. The events stay similar, but your perspective doesn't. That's when time stops looking like a line or even a circle. It becomes a spiral. In a loop, you face the same situation many times. The first time, you react with instinct. The next time, you react with awareness. After that, you start asking why it keeps happening. Eventually, you see meaning where there used to be noise. The situation didn't change. You did. That's the spiral. You pass through the same point again, but from a higher level of understanding. You see more each time. The loop isn't flat, it has depth. This spiral effect becomes clearest with emotions. A conversation that once annoyed me started to feel different over time. In early loops, I got defensive. Later, I got curious. Why was the person repeating the same complaint? I listened. I heard the fear beneath their words. The next loop, I changed my approach. The conversation softened. Same event, different emotional height. The loop wasn't trapping me, it was guiding me upward. Even pain followed the spiral. Some moments hurt every loop. I tried avoiding them. I tried forcing new outcomes. Nothing stuck. The hurt always found me. But after enough loops, the pain started to teach me. I saw the pattern in my reactions. I saw the belief underneath the pain. I realized I wasn't just suffering. I was being shown something about myself. The trauma didn't disappear, but my relationship to it changed. The pain stayed, but the understanding rose. That is the spiral at work. We often think progress means never facing the same problem twice. But in reality, real growth often comes from meeting the same challenge with a wiser mind. The loop shows this with brutal clarity. You can't skip levels of understanding. You can only rise through them. Time also spirals in how we learn about others. At first, people look simple. You label them quickly. Nice, rude, quiet, loud. But after many loops, patterns reveal layers. A rude person isn't just rude. They're tired, insecure, or protecting something. A quiet person isn't shy. They're observant. The more loops I lived, the more I realized I was wrong about people. Not because they changed, but because I saw them from new angles. Time gave me repeated access to the same moment until I finally understood its depth. The spiral also appears in decision-making. In the beginning, choices feel binary, right or wrong, yes or no. After countless loops, I saw the complexity. A choice isn't just about outcome, it's about intention, timing, context, emotion. The loop forced me to live with the consequences of each option, then reset and try again. Each attempt taught me a different layer of the same situation. I didn't get smarter in one leap. I spiraled upward through experience. One of the biggest realizations was that understanding doesn't erase mistakes, it transforms them. I made the same mistake many times in the loop, but each time I understood more about why I made it. Eventually, I stopped judging myself and started learning from it. That shift turned shame into growth. In linear time, mistakes feel permanent. In looped time, they feel like stepping stones. The spiral reframes failure as part of the path, not the end of it. Time even spirals in identity. I didn't become a new person in one breakthrough moment. I became new piece by piece. In one loop, I practiced honesty. In another, patience. In another, vulnerability. Each loop added a layer. I wasn't looping back to the same self. I was returning to myself with more clarity. The past versions of me didn't disappear. They stacked beneath who I became, like rings in a tree. The spiral held them all. Even the concept of destiny started to shift. At first, I believed fate was fixed because events repeated. Later, I believed free will was absolute because I found ways to change outcomes. In the end, I realized both were true, depending on my level of awareness. When I was blind to myself, the loop felt like fate. When I grew, the loop responded. Fate was the lower circle. Free will was the higher spiral. Time didn't trap me. It waited for me to rise. The spiral also showed up in how I related to the loop itself. In early loops, I hated it. I wanted out. In the middle, I used it as a tool. Near the end, I understood it. The loop wasn't just a reset. It was a teacher. It didn't care about convenience. It cared about truth. It kept pulling me back, not because I was failing, but because I hadn't seen deeply enough. The day stopped repeating only when my understanding completed a full revolution and rose beyond it. The most surprising part was how much the spiral shape mirrors real life outside of loops. People revisit the same emotional lessons at different ages. A fear from childhood returns in adulthood in a different form. Love challenges you in new ways each time you experience it. You think you're going backward, but you're not. You're circling upward to deeper maturity. Growth often feels like returning to the same place, but mentally, you're standing higher. Time isn't just forward or backward. It's inward, it's upward, it's layered. The loop just makes that visible. Each repeat isn't a reset, it's a rotation. Each rotation reveals more of the truth. The day may look the same, but the person inside it becomes different. And that difference is what changes everything. The loop finally ends without warning. There is no sound, no flash, no obvious signal. You don't get a message saying, "Congratulations, you've escaped." You just open your eyes one morning and everything feels slightly off. The light enters the room at a new angle. The silence has a different tone. Something in the air doesn't match your memory. At first, you don't believe it. You wait for the familiar rhythm to start, but it doesn't. The clock still ticks. The world still moves, but the pattern you memorized for countless loops is gone. It feels like waking from a vivid dream, disorienting and intimate at the same time. Part of you wants to dismiss it. Maybe you're just imagining the difference, but then small things confirm it. The neighbor who always watered their plants at the same time is late. The cup that always fell from the counter stays on the shelf. Someone starts a conversation you've never heard before. A moment that was rigid now bends. For a while, relief hits like fresh air after suffocation. The weight of repetition lifts. You don't have to plan every second. You don't have to brace for inevitable outcomes. The world feels wide again. You feel movement in time, real movement. The day flows forward instead of snapping back. It feels like freedom. But freedom is strange when you've lived inside certainty. In the loop, even the worst moments were predictable. You always knew what was coming. Now you don't. The unknown used to be terrifying. Over time, the loop trained you to control, plan, and anticipate. Outside the loop, unpredictability returns, and it takes effort to trust it. You feel both grateful and uneasy. You gained the future back, but you also lost the safety of rehearsal. Something deeper lingers too, something no reset can erase. The loops live inside you like layers of memory. You remember every version of conversations, every mistake, every success, every version of yourself. You carry thousands of days that never technically happened. The world only remembers one. You remember them all. It's hard to explain that to anyone. You can't tell people you lived the same day 100 times. You can't say you know their habits, fears, and secrets before they ever reveal them. You've seen their angry days and their softest moments. They think they're meeting you for the first time. You know them like an old friend. The gap is silent and heavy. Even happy memories from the loop linger with a bittersweet edge. You shared deep moments with people who will never recall them. You learned to love them in ways they never experienced. You comforted them in pain they won't go through again. Those connections helped you grow, but they belong to versions of the day that no longer exist. Yet you still feel them. The grief of losing something intangible becomes part of you. The loop also ingrains habits. You notice patterns even when you try not to. You anticipate reactions. You sense timing. You read people with a precision that startles them. You can tell when someone is hiding something before they speak. You can sense tension before it arrives. To others, it looks like intuition. In reality, it's pattern recognition burned into your bones. The loop sharpened your perception. Still, the most powerful thing that lingers is the understanding of time itself. You no longer see time as a straight line. You don't assume one moment replaces the last. You see echoes. You notice cycles. You sense that some conversations happen because they must. Some lessons return until learned. Life outside the loop still contains loops, just slower, less obvious. People repeat emotional patterns. Families repeat stories across generations. Fear repeats until faced. Love repeats until received. You recognize these spirals everywhere. You don't get frustrated as quickly. You look deeper. The loop taught you that progress often looks like returning to the same place with more wisdom. There's also a quiet fear that the loop could start again. You wake up some mornings and hold your breath, waiting. You test small details to confirm you are still free. You listen for the sound that always came before resets. When it doesn't come, you relax, but only slightly. The experience changed your nervous system. Part of you will always be listening for the snap of repetition. Not out of paranoia, but memory. Even with the fear, something beautiful remains. You no longer take time for granted. In the loop, days felt disposable. You could waste an entire one and fix it later. Outside the loop, you feel the weight of finality again. Each sunrise feels rare. Each goodbye feels real. Each conversation feels like it might never return. That awareness makes life sharper, more fragile, more sacred. You also treat people differently. You learned that most conflict is misunderstood emotion. You saw how often people speak from pain, not cruelty. You learned how powerful patience and empathy can be when repeated across many attempts. You don't need 1,000 loops to understand someone anymore. You carry that practice in you. You listen with depth. You respond with care. You don't rush relationships. You don't assume surface behavior tells the whole story. The final reset isn't just freedom. It's a threshold. It separates who you were from who you became. Inside the loop, you were unfinished. The loop shaped you, challenged you, broke you, rebuilt you. When it ended, it wasn't because the day was perfect. It ended because you were finally ready to live without needing the rewind. And even though the loop is gone, its fingerprints stay on everything. You speak with more intention. You choose with more awareness. You recognize patterns before they repeat. You feel time differently, not as something that moves past you, but as something you move through with purpose. It feels like waking from a dream, but your heart knows it was real. The world may not remember, but you do, and that memory changes the way you walk through every day that follows. The object shouldn't exist, yet there it is, sitting on the table like it's always belonged. You don't remember placing it there. No one else claims it. It isn't store-bought. It isn't handmade. It has no brand, no seams, no signs of wear. It looks new, but not in the way manufactured things look new. It looks inevitable. like an idea that became solid. You pick it up. It's heavier than expected. Familiar, but unfamiliar. You search your memory for origin. Nothing. You ask others. They shrug. Some say they've seen it before without knowing when. Others insist it wasn't there yesterday. But you know yesterday well, and the day before that, and the 1,000 days before. You've lived them all. You've seen everything on this table, and this was not here. In a time loop, objects normally reset. Anything you take, break, or change vanishes when the loop restarts. But this object doesn't. It remains, day after day. It ignores the reset the way you do. That makes it special, dangerous, meaningful. You test it, you move it to the shelf. The next loop, it's still there. You hide it under the floor. It stays. It's the only thing besides your memory that time refuses to erase. You examine it closer. Its shape doesn't make sense. It feels like many designs at once, layered, simple yet intricate. It reminds you of a tool, but you don't know its function. Sometimes it looks slightly different between loops, not in form, but in presence. Some days it feels warm, like it remembers you. Other days it feels distant, like it belongs to someone else. It adapts, but in a way that reflects rather than changes. You consider possible creators. Did you make it in a previous loop and forget? But you remember everything. Memory is your curse and your anchor. You never created this. You would know, unless it came from a version of you that existed before your memory began. The idea chills you. What if there were loops before the loops you recall? What if the object is a leftover from an earlier cycle? A message from a past self you never met? Or maybe someone else in the world remembers the loops too. What if you were never the only one? Maybe another person woke up with memory just like you, and they made this object using knowledge you don't have. Maybe they tried to break the loop in a different way. Maybe this object is the result, a failed escape, a clue, a warning, or proof that someone else has been awake in time alongside you, just out of reach. You try testing others again. You place the object in front of them. Some people react with curiosity. Others react with strange recognition, like they feel something but can't name it. One person stares at it too long. On the next loop, you confront them. They don't remember the conversation, but they flinch when they see the object again. Something deep inside them remembers. That means the object doesn't just persist in time. It persists in the subconscious. It leaves emotional residue. That's when a new idea forms. Maybe the object wasn't built by hands. Maybe it was built by repetition. In loops, certain thoughts appear again and again. Certain choices repeat across countless versions of the day. Maybe you weren't the only one having those thoughts. Maybe every person in the loop contributed a tiny fragment of intention over time. What if the object is the physical result of accumulated desire, fear, memory, longing, compressed into matter? No single person made it. Everyone did, without knowing. The object could be the shape of collective experience. The loop might be more than a prison or a test. It might be a forge. Every loop presses the world, refining something small until it solidifies. Not all loops produce objects. Most produce lessons, emotions, shifts in identity. But maybe, when enough loops align and focus, something intangible crosses into the physical. The object could be the universe's way of saying, something changed. Not in a single moment, but through repeated attempts, through persistence, through shared, silent effort. Maybe it is the first artifact of progress that the loop couldn't erase. Not because of logic, but because of meaning. The object exists because the loop itself allowed it to, or because the loop no longer could prevent it. Still, the question remains, what is it for? You experiment, you press it, twist it, try to open it. Nothing. You carry it with you through the day. Some events feel different when you hold it. Conversations go deeper. Emotions surface faster. People open up without prompting. The object doesn't act, it amplifies. It brings truth closer to the surface. It doesn't change fate, it reveals it. It doesn't force free will, it invites it. In one loop, during a painful moment you've relived many times, you hold the object tightly. The moment still hurts, but this time you don't shut down. You stay present. The pain doesn't drown you, it moves through you. And when it passes, you feel lighter, not shattered. The loop responds. The next morning, something shifts. The world breathes in a new rhythm. The object didn't fix the loop, but it connected your healing to something larger. Maybe the object isn't a tool, but a mirror. Not of the past, but of the potential. It holds the combined imprint of every attempt, every effort, every unfinished lesson. Not just yours, everyone's. It is the memory of the loop itself, a physical record of invisible growth, proof that change happened even when time pretended it didn't. You think back to the question, who made it? Maybe no one did alone. Maybe everyone did together. Maybe the universe did in response to intention. Maybe you did, but not the version of you that exists in one day. The version that exists across all days. In that sense, the object has no origin, because its origin is the loop, and the loop is all of you. The first time I knew something before it happened, I thought it was instinct. The car turned the corner at the exact second I expected. The argument unfolded word for word. The glass slipped from someone's hand in slow motion, and I was already moving to catch it. It felt like prediction, but it was memory. The future had already happened, and I was just living it again. That's the strange thing about time loops. You don't move forward or backward. You overlap, at first. Knowing future felt like power. I could finish people's sentences. I could prevent mistakes. I could guide conversations. I could appear wise without effort. But over time, the knowledge stopped feeling magical. It felt familiar, like stories I had heard 1,000 times. The future wasn't ahead of me. It was behind me, chasing me like a shadow. I wasn't predicting. I was remembering. Then, something even stranger started happening. I noticed that some knowledge didn't come from earlier loops. It came from later ones. I would wake up already understanding something I hadn't lived yet. I would feel grief before the loss happened. I would feel peace before the resolution arrived. It was like the emotional truth of future events traveled backward, leaving traces inside me. I didn't know how I knew, but I knew. The future was bleeding into the past. Time in a loop stops following direction. It becomes layered. One version of you experiences something painful. Another version of you experiences healing. Another discovers a solution. And somehow, each version of you shares that knowledge across the loop, even if you can't trace the origin. You wake up with insight that feels earned, but you can't point to when you earned it. The information just exists in you. A perfect loop of understanding. This becomes clearest when you teach someone something you shouldn't logically know yet. There was a person I helped through a difficult moment. I told them words that felt natural, but later, I realized those were the same words they had once said to me in a future loop. They comforted me after I broke down loops later. But the loop reset, and now I was the one offering those same words to them before they ever said them to me. I didn't learn from them. I learned from myself. But which me started it? Who spoke first? It didn't matter. The knowledge was shared across time, like both of us borrowed it from each other in a loop with no beginning. That's when I understood something deeper. Knowledge doesn't always come from cause and effect. In loops, knowledge can come from necessity. The universe seems to allow information to exist as long as it fits the pattern of growth. Whether it starts in the future or past doesn't matter. If it serves the loop's purpose, it stays. This creates what looks like perfect design, but there is no designer, just self-sustaining information. Imagine writing a note to your future self, then receiving a note from your past self before you ever wrote it. You would still write it because you already received it. The loop closes on itself. No origin, yet it works. That's how most deep understanding in loops feels. You know, then you live. Then you understand why you knew. Knowledge from the future shapes the past. The past shapes your actions. Your actions create the future. The circle completes. But because you remember every cycle, the circle doesn't stay flat. It rises like a spiral. Each rotation adds insight, even if the information has no clear source. You grow through feedback from versions of yourself stretched across time. Eventually, I stopped asking, "Where did this knowledge come from?" and started asking, "What is it trying to show me?" The loop didn't care about origin. It cared about transformation. Understanding wasn't linear. It was layered through experience, intuition, memory, and emotion, blended into something whole. This also explained why some lessons felt impossible to ignore. Even if I tried to resist them, the loop would push me back to them. Not because I hadn't lived them yet, but because another version of me already had, and that knowledge was pulling me forward. The future self was guiding the past self without words. Growth didn't just happen forward, it echoed backward. I once discovered a new path through the day, something I had never tried. It unlocked a powerful shift. But after the loop reset, I already knew that path before I consciously chose it. It was like the insight from the breakthrough traveled back to the moment of waking. The action hadn't happened yet, but the wisdom from it already lived in me. I didn't need to repeat the process. I was already changed. That's when I realized the loop was less about time and more about alignment. The past and future versions of me weren't separate. They were converging. Every loop brought them closer. Eventually, there was no earlier me or later me. There was only me, the one who had lived all versions and held all knowledge, regardless of sequence. The perfect loop isn't just time resetting. It's knowledge linking the ends until they become the same point. When the past understands the future, and the future honors the past, the loop doesn't feel like a trap. It becomes complete, whole, seamless. It stops being something that repeats and becomes something that supports itself. That is when the loop ends or evolves, not when time breaks, but when you do. When you embody everything you were meant to learn. When knowledge no longer belongs to yesterday or tomorrow, but lives fully in the present. The future becomes history, the past becomes guidance, and you stand in the center where they meet. That is the perfect loop, self-sustaining, originless, and true. The first time I heard the song, it felt ancient and familiar, like a memory I never lived. It drifted through the air from somewhere I couldn't see, soft at first, then stronger, like it was searching for someone to notice. The melody was simple but haunting. The moment it reached me, I knew it mattered. I tried to follow it to its source, but when I turned the corner, the sound was gone. No radio, no instrument, no singer, just silence. The next day, in the loop, I heard it again. Same melody, same phrasing, same ache in my chest. I chased it a second time, faster. Still nothing. I asked people nearby if they heard music. Most said no. One person paused, frowning, then said, "Maybe." It was like the song existed on the edge of awareness, slipping through the cracks of memory. On some loops, I only caught a fragment. On others, I heard the full progression, every note resting exactly where it belonged. The more I heard it, the more it lived in me. I hummed it when I woke up. I whistled it while walking. It stayed in my head across resets, just like my memories. Most things disappeared when the loop restarted. Sound, movement, objects. But the song didn't. It was immune, like me. I started writing it down, but every time I tried, something stopped me. A distraction, a reset, a silence inside my own mind. It was as if the melody refused to become ink. One loop, I sat at a piano and let my fingers move on their own. The song flowed through them effortlessly. Someone nearby froze when they heard it. Their eyes widened. "How do you know that?" they asked. I didn't know how to answer. It felt like the wrong question, because I didn't learn it. I remembered it from a place that didn't exist. So I asked the question back, "How do you?" They opened their mouth, then stopped. "I don't know." The loop reset. Now I had proof. The song wasn't just in me, it was spreading. I tested it. I played it in public. Some people ignored it. Some tilted their heads with faint recognition. A few started humming along without knowing why. They couldn't name the song, but they felt it. It lived in them the way it lived in me, quiet, buried, waiting. This raised a strange paradox. Who wrote it? If I didn't create it and no one else claimed it, how did it exist? Music has a source. Even folk melodies travel through history with a trail. This one appeared fully formed, yet nowhere. It sounded too intentional to be random. It felt too emotional to be artificial. One night, in the stillness of the loop, I asked myself the question differently. Does a song need a composer to exist? Or can it exist because someone hears it? Maybe songs don't start when they are written. Maybe they start when the world is ready to feel them. Perhaps the melody formed in collective memory before any single person gave it shape. In a normal timeline, those emotions would scatter. But in a loop, repetition compresses experience. When countless days repeat, thoughts and feelings align across different people. What if the loop allowed an emotional pattern to crystallize into sound? Maybe the song formed from the shared longing of everyone trapped in repetition, a longing for change, for release, for understanding. That longing needed a voice, and music is the purest form of emotion crossing boundaries. So the song emerged not from a composer, but from the loop itself. But the more I thought about it, the more I wondered if the loop was the composer, not as a conscious being, but as a mechanism of convergence. When the same moments happen thousands of times, the mind starts connecting threads. People feel things simultaneously without speaking. Emotions sync. A melody could easily take shape in the shared consciousness, and all it needed was one person to notice it. Maybe I was the first to listen closely, or maybe someone before me heard it in a previous cycle and hummed it softly. Maybe I picked it up from them without realizing. Then I played it, and someone else heard it from me. The chain formed without a beginning. The loop fed the melody to itself. No one wrote it. Everyone did. This idea became clearer when something strange happened. I tried playing the song slightly differently, changing one note. The melody resisted. Not physically, but emotionally. The moment I altered it, it lost its weight. It felt wrong. The original version had a perfect inevitability, like it had already been refined over thousands of invisible drafts. But no drafts existed, unless each loop was a draft. Every subtle humming, every half-remembered fragment from different minds, all merging across time until the best version remained. Evolution through repetition. So who composed it? The loop composed it through us. We were vessels. The song was the sum of our shared experience. Once I accepted that, I started to notice other things. The song changed the atmosphere. People who heard it became more honest, softer, more aware. It didn't fix the loop, but it shifted the day. It opened something. It united people without them knowing why. The melody carried memory inside it. I played it one final time, during a quiet loop. I let every note ring with the weight of everything I had lived. I wasn't trying to change the world. I was just telling the truth through sound. In that moment, I understood. The song didn't need a composer. It needed witnesses. It existed because we remembered it, because we felt it, because we kept passing it forward. The next morning, the loop ended. Life moved forward. New day, new choices, new future. But every so often, I hear someone humming that melody in the distance. Not perfectly, but close enough. When I ask them where they heard it, they always say the same thing. I don't know. It just feels like it's always been there. And in a way, they're right. At first, the loop made cause and effect simple. I did something, and the same result happened every time. If I pushed a cup, it fell. If I warned someone, they paused. The world felt like clockwork. Patterns were tight. Consequences were clear. But over many loops, the logic started to blur. Sometimes I did the same thing and got a different result. Sometimes I did something different and got the same result anyway. The world wasn't malfunctioning. It was revealing its deeper rules. The more I paid attention, the more I saw that cause and effect were not a straight line. They overlapped like threads in a knot. There was a moment that broke my understanding completely. I comforted someone during a difficult conversation. My words came naturally, like I had practiced them before. They landed with perfect timing. Later loops revealed why. It was the same person who, in a future loop, comforted me using those exact words. I remembered their tone and phrasing so clearly that I repeated it back to them in an earlier loop. The words I spoke were inspired by something I hadn't experienced yet. They healed me in the future, and I used them to heal someone in the past. Who started it? Did I teach them, or did they teach me? Was I the cause, or the effect? The answers folded into each other until there was no separation. The loop kept offering examples. I once saved someone from an accident. I grabbed their arm without thinking. They looked at me with shock and said, "How did you know?" I almost answered, "Because I saw it yesterday," but I stayed silent. The next loop, before the accident, they hesitated and stepped back on their own. I didn't intervene. Did I influence them subconsciously? Did their memory retain a shadow of the rescue? Or did the loop decide to adjust the world because the outcome had already been changed once? Did my action cause their action? Or did their future action cause my past one? Time loops don't just trap the body. They unravel logic. Cause and effect start blending until you can't tell which one drives the other. A small hint of a future moment appears in your instincts. You make choices based on inner nudges that feel like déjà vu. You call someone before they call you. You apologize before the conflict even forms. People accuse you of reading minds. You're not. You're reading time. But even that isn't quite true. It's not that you see what will happen. It's that your future self already responded, and the memory still echoes in you. Over time, I realized that knowledge flows both directions in the loop. Information moves forward in memory and backward in intuition. Emotion travels backward too. There were mornings I woke up already grieving something that hadn't happened yet. When it finally happened later that day, I felt calm instead of shocked. My body had already lived it. Pain taught me lessons before the moment occurred. I was both the student and the teacher, just in different loops. The most unsettling overlap of cause and effect happened when I tried to change someone's fate. I spent dozens of loops trying to stop a person from making a self-destructive choice. Nothing worked. Every change created a different path that still led to the same outcome. Eventually, I gave up on altering events and changed how I spoke to them instead. In one loop, I told them something raw and honest about myself. It didn't stop their action, but it changed their heart. The next loop, they approached me first. They asked different questions. They made a different choice, not because I interfered that day, but because I had changed the day before. But the day before never technically existed. I shaped the future, and the future shaped me, and both shaped the present. The lines collapsed. The loop made me rethink responsibility. Normally, we believe actions cause results in a clear order, but the loop showed me feedback beyond time. Sometimes I acted kindly because I remembered the pain of being unkind in a future loop. Sometimes I felt fear before making a mistake because the consequence had already touched me in another version. The loop wasn't sequential, it was iterative. Life wasn't dominoes falling in a line, it was gears turning each other in a circle. This overlap wasn't only about events, it applied to identity. I changed not in a straight path, but in cycles. I met old versions of myself in new situations. I thought I had grown past certain flaws, only to face them again on a deeper layer. Cause and effect inside me overlapped. My future self guided my past self. My past pain fueled my future strength. Growth wasn't forward, it spiraled, and every loop, I brought insights backward to motivate earlier versions of myself to make different choices. There was a final moment that revealed just how tangled cause and effect could get. In the loop's last days, I acted with a sense of peace I didn't understand. I made choices with clarity I hadn't earned yet. I spoke truths I didn't know I knew. It felt like I was being guided, not by another person, but by a future version of myself who had already finished the loop. I wasn't just moving toward who I would become. Who I would become was already reaching back and shaping me. That's when I realized maybe loops don't end when you fix the past. Maybe they end when past and future finally align, when every version of you, who you were, who you are, who you will be, merge into one continuous understanding. Cause and effect become the same thing, growth. The moment that ends the loop might also be the moment that started it. The first cause might also be the final effect. The mystery deepens because there is no single answer. The loop taught me that life isn't a straight story. It's a network of influence across time. Sometimes the future births the past. Sometimes the past shapes the future. Sometimes both create each other in one silent agreement. And in that overlap, where cause and effect share the same breath, that's where the truth lives. The longer you live in a time loop, the harder it is to believe time is just a force. It starts to feel like it's paying attention. At first, the loop looks mechanical. Day resets, events repeat. Everything follows a rigid pattern. But as you interact with it, you begin to notice small, intentional shifts, not random mistakes, not glitches, adjustments that feel deliberate, as if the loop is responding to who you are, not what you do. In the beginning, I tried to break everything. I disrupted schedules. I interfered with people's routines. I took extreme actions just to see if the loop cared. The world snapped right back every morning with exact precision. 2 minutes late, reset. Someone cries, reset. Tragedy avoided, reset. It felt cold, unfeeling, absolute. But that was only surface-level time, the outer shell. When I stopped thrashing and started paying attention, I saw something different. The loop didn't always reset for the same reasons. Sometimes I made the same choices, but the day felt slightly different. People phrased things in new ways. Someone paused where they never paused before. A question appeared where silence normally was. The loop was stable until I changed emotionally. When I did, time shifted its texture. That was the first sign. The loop was not reacting to events. It was reacting to me. It almost felt like training. If I tried to skip a lesson, the loop pushed me back. If I avoided a hard conversation, the loop brought it closer. If I numbed myself, the loop intensified the day until I couldn't ignore my feelings. But when I leaned in, when I faced fear, when I allowed vulnerability, the loop relaxed. It widened. It let me move differently. It wasn't punishing or rewarding. It was directing. Like a teacher that never explained the curriculum, but never let me leave the classroom until I understood. One day, I tested something deeper. I stopped focusing on fixing events and started paying attention to intention. I made a choice not because I wanted a different result, but because I meant it. Instantly, the loop responded. The day didn't end differently, but it felt different. There was a subtle click in the air, like something locked into place. That's when I realized time wasn't tracking action. It was tracking authenticity. That realization changed everything. I started treating the loop as a communication rather than a cage. I asked, "What are you showing me?" instead of, "Why are you doing this to me?" The more I aligned with honesty, empathy, growth, the more the loop evolved. Patterns that were once rigid became flexible. People said things they never said in previous iterations. The world adapted based on my internal state. It wasn't just me learning. The loop was adjusting with me. It almost felt alive. Some loops felt gentle, giving me space to experiment. Others felt harsh, forcing me to confront pain. But every tone shift was precise. The loop knew exactly when I needed pressure and when I needed mercy. It timed emotional breakthroughs better than any human could. If I tried too early, the moment didn't land. If I tried too late, the loop pushed harder. The timing of transformation always felt intelligent. There were moments that proved it further. I once tried to manipulate the loop by pretending to change while staying the same internally. Time didn't fall for it. The day repeated as if nothing happened. No matter how perfect I acted on the outside, the loop wouldn't move until something inside me shifted for real. That's not randomness, that's discernment. Even the people within the loop behaved like instruments of that intelligence. They didn't remember the loops, but their reactions changed depending on how I approached them emotionally. If I showed patience, they opened up faster, even if they had never opened up in any previous loop. If I approached with ego, they resisted, even when I used the right words. It was as if the loop used them as mirrors, reflecting where I truly stood each day. The deepest sign came when I started seeing echoes, patterns from future loops bleeding backward into earlier ones. I felt lessons before I learned them. I sensed outcomes before they formed. Time wasn't just repeating, it was folding, blending past and future insight into the present. I'd wake up already understanding something I hadn't experienced yet, like time was feeding me knowledge out of sequence to prepare me. That's not a simple loop, that's orchestration. It stopped feeling like I was looping through time and started feeling like time was looping through me. I wasn't moving through static days. The days were shaping themselves around my growth. Each loop was a precise response to my current state of mind. When I resisted change, time tightened. When I accepted, time widened. When I transformed, time released. And then, when I finally reached the inner shift the loop had been steering me toward, not perfection, but wholeness, the reset didn't happen. The next morning was new. Time moved forward again. No fanfare, no instructions. Just quiet momentum. And even then, I could feel it. Time was still watching, still guiding, still intelligent. It didn't need to trap me anymore. Now it could walk beside me. That's when the final realization landed. Time was never my enemy. It wasn't malfunctioning. It wasn't random. It was intentional. It folded back on itself, not to imitate failure, but to create alignment. Time didn't just measure change. It demanded it. It didn't just track growth. It nurtured it. A loop was not punishment. It was precision. Time loops force you to look at people in a way normal life never does. In a single timeline, you see what someone does once and assume you understand them. You label them quickly: kind, rude, selfish, quiet. You never witness the 1,000 possible versions of them, but in a loop, you do. You see how they act under stress, under joy, when they're watched, when they're alone. You see what changes and what never does. And somewhere in that repetition, characters stop being just people in your world. They become both the reason you change and the result of your change. In early loops, I treated people like obstacles or puzzles. If someone caused a problem, I worked around them. If they slowed me down, I avoided them. I didn't think about why they acted the way they did. I was focused on outcomes. But over time, repetition wore down the surface. I noticed patterns in their fears, their hopes, their habits. A man who always snapped at others wasn't cruel. He was terrified of losing control. A woman who avoided conflict wasn't weak. She was exhausted from fighting battles no one saw. Once I understood them, I couldn't see them as one-dimensional anymore. They inspired empathy, curiosity, and growth in me. Some characters became teachers without knowing it. One loop, a quiet child, asked me a simple question: "Why do you try so hard if the day just restarts?" I didn't know how to answer, but the question stayed. It echoed in me through countless loops. That child didn't remember asking, but I remembered being asked. They changed the way I thought about purpose. They made me examine my motives. Their innocence revealed something about my own exhaustion. In that moment, they became inspiration, even though they didn't understand the impact. Another character, someone stubborn and difficult, became my greatest motivation. I tried changing them, fixing them, guiding them. It never worked. They resisted every attempt. For a long time, I saw them as the barrier keeping me stuck. But eventually I realized something. Maybe they weren't supposed to change. Maybe I was. Their resistance forced me to examine why I needed them to be different. When I accepted them as they were, without trying to control them, something shifted in me. The next loop, they opened up on their own. They changed only after I did. They became both the inspiration and the result. This happened again and again. I would grow because of someone. Then later, I would help them grow without even trying. The direction of influence became impossible to track. Did I change them because they changed me first? Or did they change because I was becoming someone who could reach them? Cause and effect blurred. Character and transformation became a shared loop. The most powerful relationships in the loop didn't follow linear paths. Sometimes I helped someone on day 50, and they helped me back on day 200. Other times, someone taught me a lesson I didn't understand until 20 loops later, and only then did I realize they had planted a seed. Characters became inspiration in one loop, and the result of my choices in the next. We were shaping each other in cycles. Even minor characters, people I overlooked in early loops, became essential later. The barista I ignored for weeks told me one sentence that changed everything. The stranger on the bus offered perspective in a moment I felt lost. The neighbor I never spoke to became the person who unknowingly held the emotional key to the loop. Each character held a piece of the whole. None of them were random background noise. Time kept bringing them back because they mattered. They weren't just there to fill the day. They were there to shape me. But the most fascinating part was discovering that I was doing the same for them. Even though they didn't remember loops, something in them shifted after certain conversations. If I treated someone with respect in one loop, the next loop, they seemed more confident even without knowing why. If I showed patience, they became softer. If I showed vulnerability, they trusted me sooner. Emotional patterns carried over in subtle ways. The loop didn't save memories, but it saved momentum. Over time, I realized something important. The loop wasn't only about my journey, it was about everyone's. My growth affected theirs. Their growth affected mine. The loop wasn't centered on a single character. It was centered on connection. I didn't need to solve the loop alone. I needed to become someone who lifted others and allowed them to lift me. Eventually, the characters I once saw as static figures became mirrors. They reflected my progress. In early loops, they stayed predictable because I was predictable. When I changed, they responded. If I entered the day guarded, they stayed shallow. If I showed up fully present, they showed depth. They weren't just inspiration, they were feedback. They showed me where I stood. The final shift came when I realized I had become that for them too. Even if they didn't remember, they began reacting to the version of me I had become over countless loops. I no longer had to force outcomes. I simply had to be aligned. They responded differently, not because I changed what I did, but because I changed who I was. That's when I saw it clearly. Characters are both the cause and the effect of transformation. We make each other. We shape each other. Even after the loop ended, the effect remained. Some people felt familiar, even when they shouldn't. They trusted me quickly. They saw something in me I didn't show yet. It was like the echo of past loops still lived between us. They had inspired the person I became, and now I could be the reason they became someone too. Characters in loops are not random pieces in a story. They are the engine of growth. They are the spark that starts the change, and the truth that the change is real. They are both the beginning and the result. The mind is trained to search for origins. We like the comfort of first causes and clean starting points, as if everything meaningful must begin with a spark we can identify. We build stories in straight lines. This event caused that one, and therefore the chain makes sense. But time loops destroy that structure. In a loop, events repeat. Actions ripple in both directions, and the future can shape the past just as easily as the past shapes the future. At some point, the old logic falls apart, and a subtle truth begins to surface. Maybe creation does not need a beginning at all. Maybe it only needs to exist. The first crack in my belief came when I encountered knowledge I could not trace. I understood how to comfort someone in a way I hadn't learned. I used the words naturally. Only later did I realize someone had spoken those same words to me, but in a future loop. I brought that knowledge backward, then handed it forward. Who was the origin? Me or them? The loop erased the line between teacher and student. The wisdom felt timeless, as if it lived outside any single moment. Time loops turn events into mirrors, and mirrors do not care about sequence. One moment can inform another, even if logic says the second should come first. A decision I made on day 50 helped me solve something on day 5. A breakthrough in a later loop made earlier loops feel obvious in hindsight, even though the original moment happened after the effect. Cause and effect swirled until I could no longer separate them. The more I tried to force a starting point, the more the loop showed me that beginnings are often artificial labels we place on a much longer process. Once I stopped clinging to the idea of a first moment, I started to see how creation often behaves like emergence rather than invention. I think of how a melody can appear in the mind fully formed. It feels like inspiration, but it might be the result of thousands of subtle influences and emotions coming together unseen. I think of how culture evolves. The first person to say a phrase may not be the true origin, because countless conversations built the conditions for that phrase to exist. In the loop, this became even more extreme. A song appeared in multiple people's memories, even though no one composed it. It grew piece by piece across many loops, each person contributing unconsciously. When I finally played it out loud in full, others recognized it without knowing how. The song existed because we all heard it, felt it, and refined it. It didn't come from someone. It came from the loop itself, from the shared experiences spread across time. That same pattern appeared in personal growth. I used to think transformation happened in one big moment, a breakthrough, a revelation, a decision. But in the loop, I saw how change built quietly. I repeated similar situations over and over, sometimes failing, other times making small progress. Each loop added context I didn't realize I was collecting. Then, on one specific day, something clicked. I acted differently, not because I forced it, but because I was ready. It looked sudden, but the groundwork had been laid across dozens of loops. Was that change born in that moment? Or had it always been forming, waiting for the right alignment? The loop made the answer feel irrelevant. Creation wasn't an event, it was an unfolding. As I paid attention, I noticed this unfolding everywhere. People who seemed stubborn eventually shifted, not from one conversation, but from a series of subtle interactions. Emotional walls didn't fall with force. They dissolved through small acts of honesty over time. Even my own identity didn't appear in one loop or another. It evolved like a spiral, returning to the same themes from a higher perspective each time. The more I understood, the more I felt like I was remembering rather than inventing new versions of myself. Growth felt less like becoming someone new and more like uncovering who I had always been capable of becoming. This idea changed how I viewed reality outside the loop as well. Trees don't start from a single act. One tree grows, drops seeds, dies, and the forest continues. Language does not begin with one speaker. Creativity rarely appears from nowhere. We label inventions with single names, but behind every idea are hundreds of influences. The loop didn't create this truth. It just made it impossible to ignore. When time stopped behaving like a line, I stopped forcing creation into linear structures. The most profound shift happened when I began to see time itself as a participant. The loop didn't just repeat blindly, it adjusted based on growth. When I avoided emotional truths, time tightened its grip and pushed me back to them. When I approached situations with honesty, time softened and opened new possibilities. The loop responded to intention. It didn't reward performance, it responded to alignment. That made time feel intelligent, not in a literal sense, but in a purposeful one. It guided, it reshaped, and it held certain moments in place until I was ready to understand them. It didn't act like a machine. It acted like a teacher. As the loops continued, I noticed things forming in ways that felt organic, as if the loop was weaving fragments into something cohesive. Ideas matured without a starting point. Relationships deepened across resets, even when people didn't remember. Emotional truths emerged in conversations that had never happened before, yet felt inevitable. The loop wasn't repeating to torture me, it was refining something. It was building meaning until it crystallized. And that is when the paradox made sense. Maybe creation doesn't require a beginning, because beginnings are often hidden inside cycles. Maybe the moment we call start is simply when we first notice something that has been forming beneath the surface. A melody hums in many minds before someone plays it. A change lives in the heart before action reflects it. A realization exists in fragments before our awareness catches up. In this light, creation is not about origin, it is about arrival. It shows up when alignment occurs, not because someone forced it into existence, but because everything finally supports it. And once it exists, we try to trace it back, looking for the first hands that shaped it. But in loops and in life, some creations are collective, cyclical, emergent. The paradox whispers quietly, but it lingers. Maybe creation does not start at all. Maybe it gathers. Maybe it waits. Maybe it reveals itself when we finally become ready to see it. Maybe it was always there, becoming real the moment we give it space. Identity feels simple when time moves in one direction. You think you are shaped only by what has already happened. Childhood, choices, mistakes, Those form the past, and the past forms you. The future is unknown, and you assume it will just build on what came before. But in a loop, the future arrives before it's supposed to. You remember what hasn't happened yet. You act with knowledge you haven't earned. You change based on experiences you technically never lived in this version of the day. And once that begins, identity starts to fracture. Are you the person built by your past, or the one sculpted by your future? In the first loops, I only changed because I remembered. I used future outcomes to make better choices. If a conversation went badly, I adjusted it the next day. If someone got hurt, I protected them before the danger arrived. I thought memory was just a tool, but over time, something more complex happened. I didn't just copy actions from future loops. I started absorbing emotional lessons from them. I woke up already different. Some mornings, I felt wiser before living the day. Some mornings, I felt grief before anything went wrong. Future me was sending emotions backward. The first time this struck me, I woke with a deep sense of peace for no logical reason. The day felt already resolved. Later that afternoon, I had a breakthrough conversation with someone I'd struggled to reach for dozens of loops. It changed everything for both of us. Then the loop reset. I thought the peace would vanish, but the next morning, I still felt it. That meant the emotional growth from the future didn't stay in the future. It became part of me in the past. I didn't wait to become that version of myself. I already was. That raised a haunting question. If future experiences can shape your identity before they happen, when do you actually become you? Am I the person who acted in that breakthrough loop, or the one who benefits before acting at all? There's no clear answer because the loops allow identity to circulate instead of progress linearly. Past me influences future me, who then influences an earlier me in return. It becomes a loop within the loop. At some point, there isn't a single version of me to identify with. There are countless versions, feeding each other with memory, intuition, fear, strength, all out of order. Sometimes the influence felt intentional, as if a future version of me was guiding my hand. I would pause before reacting to someone harshly, not because I chose patience in that moment, but because a part of me already remembered the regret of not holding back. That version of me existed ahead of me in time, but reached backward to steer me. I wasn't just learning from the past, I was learning from the future. And once you realize that, the idea of a stable identity collapses. How do you define who you are if who you are depends on what you haven't lived yet? Identity also blurs when you see how many different versions of yourself exist across loops. In one loop, I was selfish. In another, generous. In one, I avoided conflict. In another, I confronted it. In some, I was brave. In some, I broke. Every version felt real at the time. Every version had reasons. If time had continued linearly, one of those versions would have become permanent, and I would have called it who I am. But in the loop, I lived them all. Which one was my true self? All of them? None? The loop forced a deeper question. Is identity a final state or a constant negotiation? Maybe we only think of identity as fixed because time normally gives us one path. In a loop, the illusion disappears. You see that identity forms every time you make a choice, and each loop gives you countless choices. Identity is fluid, layered, evolving with no single version being absolute. The most unsettling moment came when I realized something even stranger. Some of the best parts of who I had become, my compassion, my patience, my insight, didn't come from the past or the future. They came from the relationship between the two. I grew because I held both at once. The past gave me memory. The future gave me understanding. That combination created someone new. Not the past self, not the future self. A self shaped by time folding in both directions. Once that clicked, I started to feel unity rather than fragmentation. I stopped thinking of myself as versions and started recognizing them as layers. The frightened me from early loops still existed in me. The brave me from later loops also existed. The one who failed and the one who triumphed both belonged. Identity became less about choosing which version was the real one, and more about integrating all of them. The loop showed me every facet of who I could be, then asked me to decide how much of each I wanted to carry forward. But integration only happened after I accepted how unsettling it is to be shaped by a future you haven't lived. Because that process forces you to ask, if the future influences who I am, then do I truly own my identity? Or am I simply the product of a path laid out ahead of me? And if I feel guided by a wiser version of myself, is that still free will? Or is it destiny in disguise? Yet when I tried ignoring those future nudges, life felt shallow. When I followed them, I grew. Sometimes identity is not about choosing independence from influence. Sometimes it's about recognizing which influences help you become your truest self, even if those influences come from a place you can't logically explain. In the end, the loop taught me that identity isn't built only from what has happened. It's also built from what you are capable of becoming. The future self does shape the past self. The past self shapes the future. Between the two, identity becomes a conversation, not a single voice, but a chorus. And once you hear that chorus, you cannot go back to believing you are only the sum of your history. You are also the echo of your potential. We like to believe every event has a starting point. It's how we make sense of chaos, find the cause, explain the effect, move forward. But in a loop, cause and effect don't behave. They blur, they double back on each other. You try to trace the line, only to discover the line curves into a circle. The more you chase the moment where everything began, the more it slips between your fingers. I remember the first time I tried to find the beginning of the loop. I thought if I could identify the moment time broke, I could fix it. I studied the day from the moment I woke up. I tracked every detail, every face, every interaction. I looked for anomalies, anything out of place. But no matter how closely I watched, the loop reset again with no clear trigger. It didn't start when something dramatic happened. It didn't start when I made a mistake. It just was. It felt less like a broken timeline and more like the loop had always been there, waiting for me to notice it. So I went deeper. I tried to find the origin of specific events instead. Why did this argument always happen? Why did this accident always occur at the same time? Who caused it first? I observed every loop, looking for the initial push. But what I found instead was that causes were layered. The argument happened because of stress, which came from fear, which came from an earlier conversation, which came from something unspoken long before. Every time I thought I found the first domino, I discovered another one behind it. The origin wasn't a point, it was a chain, one too deep to reach the beginning of. I thought maybe objects would be easier. There was something in the loop that didn't reset, a strange item that didn't belong to anyone. I tried to track where it appeared first. I asked every person if they'd seen it before. Some said yes, some said no. Some had vague memories. It didn't help. The more I tried to trace it back, the more confusing it became. One day, someone mentioned they only noticed it because they saw me carrying it earlier. But I only carried it because I thought I got it from them. We were each other's cause. The object existed because it was noticed, and it was noticed because it existed. That's when I understood something unsettling. The origin might not exist in a way I can understand. Or worse, it might exist everywhere at once. Even in myself, I tried tracing my own transformation. When did I start changing? Which loop shifted me first? I tried to identify the before and after, but I couldn't find a clean line. Growth didn't have a beginning. I saw that some of the changes in me came from future experiences. Some came from past pain. Some simply emerged in the quiet moments between loops. Every version of me influenced the others, backward and forward. Which one was the original me? I couldn't say. The further I searched, the more fragmented identity became. There was no single first version, just layers. That realization spread to everything. Conversations I thought I initiated were actually responses to seeds planted in earlier loops. Ideas I believed were original, your echoes of something someone once said in a future loop. People influenced me before I influenced them, and I influenced them before they influenced me. It stopped making sense to ask who started what. The more I chased the first moment, the more time curved, revealing no edge to grab onto. The loop felt intelligent because it didn't allow me to escape with shallow answers. If I tried to cling to a simple cause, time exposed the deeper one. If I tried to blame an event, the loop revealed the emotion underneath. If I tried to blame myself, it showed me how many other forces were woven in. Every origin was connected to something else. Every thread led to another thread. Eventually, I understood that tracing back endlessly isn't insight, it's obsession. The loop wasn't hiding the origin from me. It was teaching me that origins are rarely single points. They're convergences. They're slow buildups. They're shared. They're complex. Sometimes they're circular. Sometimes the end creates the beginning. Sometimes the future pulls the past into shape. Sometimes you only notice the start after you reach the end, and by then the line has already closed. I once asked someone in the loop, "When do you think things really begin for a person?" They thought for a long time and said, "When they finally understand why it matters." That stuck with me. Maybe origins aren't about time. Maybe they're about awareness. The moment you become conscious of something can feel like its birth, even if it existed long before you noticed. Looking back, the loop itself might not have had a first day. Maybe it only became real to me when I was ready to recognize it. Maybe the loop didn't start when time rewound. Maybe it started when I became the kind of person who needed it. The paradox is that I kept searching for the first cause, without realizing I might also be it. The harder I tried to corner the beginning, the more time slipped sideways. The loop didn't want me to ask, "Where did this start?" It wanted me to ask, "What is this showing me?" Instead of digging backward, I learned to stand still and see the whole pattern at once. When I did, I realized something important. Not everything needs an origin to be real. Some things are born from accumulation, convergence, resonance. Creation doesn't always start. Change doesn't always begin. Some things simply appear because everything before them demanded they exist. The more I chase the origin, the further it slips away, because maybe the origin isn't behind me. Maybe I'm standing in it.